won't quit. Its purpose to voice the norm is to swallow the red pill against the narrative. A ruthless force determined to keep everyone asleep. They broadcast the truth on Rumble, on clouds dropping red pills every week. Overwatch and the Guardian. The narrative is weak.
We can't let it end like this. It's too late.
Defenders of the Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian. Overwatch and the Guardian.
That was me. That was me doing the bald eagle, man. That's the best thing.
Best intro in the world.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'll tell you what. I mean, it shouldn't have shocked me. You know, you've mentioned our guest to me in the past, and you've always had good things to say about him. And you sent me some links, and you're like, "Hey, watch this stuff." And the week just got like past me faster than I realized. And I was like, "Damn it, I haven't watched it." So when I was running to go do my errands today, I started watching the first video on one of his series, and man, I was hooked, bro. I was like,
I'm telling you.
this is good. I knew like 15 minutes into it, I was just like, the audience is they're gonna follow this dude because this is awesome. Like, this is awesome.
Yep.
So you know, we're kind of having a pre-show conversation, folks. So we're a little bit behind here because you know, we're just having fun talking. And I was telling Josh and our guests that, you know, I'm very, you know, new to this awakening. You know, there's many people in the audience that have been awake far longer than I have. So I'm always looking for like great stuff to come across. It's one of the reasons I enjoy doing shows with you. I'm gonna binge watch this guy's work this week. Like that. That's where we're at. Am I simping? Yes, I'm simping, folks, because I know quality content, and not just quality content and good production, but solid information. So I'm very excited for the conversation we're gonna have tonight.
Yeah. So for anybody out there who doesn't know who our guest is, David Whitehead, and his public bio is podcaster, martial artist, coach, entrepreneur, speaker, and this guy has a lifetime of study in the esoteric information, into the occult, philosophy, comparative religion, mythology, ancient and modern mysteries, the paranormal, geopolitical events. He's all around. But listen, I've known David for many, many years now. We've done 8-hour podcasts before. 8 hours. Whiskey and podcasting, and me and David go together very well. And we've solved the mysteries of the universe multiple different times. So with our buddy Matt Presti in conversations. But he is a wealth of information and knowledge and wisdom on these topics. And, you know, when we start talking about the occult and the esoteric, and anybody out there who, if that scares you, don't let it scare you. Don't let the woo-woo scare you. Understand that there is a dark hidden world beneath us. And there's a lot of people who have been following this, tracking this, researching this, and investigating this for a very, very long time. And David's Cult of the Medics series, which we will link up for you guys. You can find it actually off of his website that is posted in our description, is phenomenal because it takes you all into the idea of pharmakia and how that evolved into the modern day pharmaceutical companies, all the way up to COVID, and what all of this means from a kind of occult perspective. And by the way, if you didn't realize it, there is an occult order that absolutely tries to run this world. And I think that much of that is being dismantled tonight. And I think that's a lot what we're going to talk about with David.
100%. So do us a favor, folks. Smash the thumb, hit the heart, share this out. Let's get a big audience in here. I'm gonna run my first ad, if you don't mind, brother, and then if you want to get something in the lineup,
go ahead.
there for you. So let me bring this on. You'll see this on my screen over here on Rumble. So if you're watching on some of these other platforms like YouTube and X, you can come grab it later. The link will be down in the description. Shout out to Rumble Wallet. They can freeze your accounts, shut off your cards, lock you out of your own money overnight, Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether, you own Tether Gold, real gold, and on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without a bank vault, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using the Rumble wallet right around somewhere over here on the bottom of the screen, peer-to-peer and outside the banking system. No permissions, no middlemen, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. And if that sounds like an ad you've heard before over on Josh's, go watch one of his shows and you'll find the link down in the description on his Rumble. And with that, I'll give it to you, Josh.
Awesome. Well, my ads on Rumble haven't really populated yet, but that's okay. Listen, guys, if you want to help support myself or Alpha, one of the best ways to do that is go to those .tv domains that you see right there, AlphaWarrior.tv. I'm in the process of helping him revamp his whole website. It's about 80% there, so it'll be up here relatively soon. So you can go to his archaic website that he has up right now from 1990s technology and see if you can find ways to help support him out there. But mine is redpills.tv. redpills.tv, and there's multiple ways to support me over there with all of my sponsors to help support our channels, my channel, as well as myself and everything that we do with alternative media. So much appreciated, guys. Thank you for all the support over the years, and let's rock and roll.
All right, let's bring our guests up on the stage. Let me get our cameras all situated. It's go time.
How's it going? Can you guys hear me?
We can. The man, the myth, the legend, David Whitehead. What's up, brother?
Oh, man. Guys, you're so generous with your intros. I really appreciate it. Josh, so good to see you, man. It's been a while. And Alpha, nice to meet you in person. Had a nice little chat behind the scenes. And definitely hello to everybody watching. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. So where are we kicking this off? Like, what's the starting point of the conversation?
So I want to get into kind of current events and what's happening. But the first thing I want to do is I want David to tell, because we have a new audience here for David. So I want David to tell a little bit about himself, how his interest, his curiosity, his research, and maybe get a little bit into the cult of the medics if he could.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that series was a series I did during the pandemic era, 2020. Everybody remembers it. It was a few years I put that together. It was meant to be a way of rolling out research I'd started back in about 2017. I'd been doing this research for a while into the pharmaceutical industry, so that's definitely one of my interests. I had a personal connection with that research due to watching my own mother grow up in and out of the hospital and seeing doctors and experts and surgeries and drugs and the whole thing my whole life. So I basically grew up as a kid in emergency waiting rooms. And so I got just, I guess, maybe thrust into it and then didn't really notice it as I was growing up in my teens until later, and had an interest in going, well, someone had basically given me a little bit of information back then about how things are corrupt and you can't just trust what the media is saying and you can't trust with a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs and these doctors. And at first, like everybody, I'm like, yeah, okay, this person's crazy, you know? And then you dig a little more, you start reading some books, you start having more personal experiences, like noticing my mother never got better. She just got worse. And thinking, all right, maybe there's something to this. So I spent basically a lifetime of curiosity into that. And then later got into surface level research, like what you'd see with like a Dell Bigtree or something like that, you know, or RFK, where you're going to get into the pharmaceutical industry. And it's all great, you know, the Rockefeller medicine, the Flexen reports, the whole thing. But I knew there were deeper layers to things, because the other thing, a product of my childhood, was my parents were evangelical Christians growing up, and they were going to a lot of these different churches in the area and were having discussions with other people from the church. I'd be kind of supposed to be up in bed and I'd be overhearing these conversations of them talking about these like satanic networks and whatnot, and how they're grabbing kids, and there's all these perverts and serial killers that are produced from these satanic networks. And I'm just like, well, they're already like, you know, they're church people. They, you know, they believe in the devil. Like, this was as a kid. I'm like, so yeah, they're going to talk about that. And but I always had a curiosity. I'm like, what if it's real, you know? And so basically what I'm telling you is my life has been a very interesting synchronicity, if I look back, of not having a normal life at all. And I was basically homeschooled, in quotes, but homeschooled was interesting because I was mostly just a caretaker for my mom, which led me to work with my brother and my dad when he could. He was working shift work. He worked for CTV News, a major media company. So I had some interesting insight into the way the media operates, which my father would tell everybody here how brutally corrupt it is. But so how do these like interesting threads that wove together a curiosity in me, along with the religious questions and the big questions of life, which I've always had, which Josh, I know you've always had, Alpha, I'm sure you too. That drove me into philosophy, religion, comparative mythology, understanding the nature of the world that I live in, what's going on in this world, what's true, what's false. Wow, people have totally different ideas of reality than I do. And why is that? And where did they get their ideas? And, the origin of ideas, and where the hell did we come from? And all these things start leading into a quest for truth and understanding about who I am, why I'm here, where the hell I am, and where I'm going. And so that's what it is. That's all I've ever done. In 2008, I started a YouTube channel. It got destroyed, later down the road, but I was just on this quest of, I started with like 9/11 and those subjects and JFK and, Roswell. And I was very much into the UFO subject my entire life, always just thoroughly fascinated with that subject. And so something in me just led me to have a curious mind and not just accept what all the adults were telling me on face value. Although I do come with a very balanced approach, because I don't think we should throw everything out. And I don't think everybody's evil and everybody's lying to us. I'm not on that camp. So you're going to find with my take, I try to find a middle ground. Sometimes I try to find some balance here. I try to have some logic and reason and make sure we're bringing sauce and receipts with what we're talking about. I sometimes challenge popular motifs that have grown up in the alternative truth community, whatever you want to call it. But in the other sense, I'm also trying to unite the clans and get groups and factions that have risen up in this truth-seeking movement or freedom-loving movement, whatever you want to call it, trying to find a way to bridge some of the gaps that I think people are having, that are fighting over useless nonsense while we get totally plundered and captured and further moving towards tyranny and things like that. So that's kind of what I do. Probably some other things in there. I run a full-time martial art business with my wife. Been doing martial arts since I was a kid. I train jiu-jitsu and kickboxing 6 days a week. I teach all the time. I have this amazing dojo. We call it the Dojo in the Woods. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's an amazing facility. I've got probably about 300 or so students. I'm currently training a competitive team to go and compete, provincially in jiu-jitsu. And we're doing really well. We've been cleaning up at local tournaments and doing really well with that. So kind of a busy guy. I'm a father, but I live in Canada as well. So I've been documenting the demise of my state as the captured nation that it is, sadly. So yeah, there you have it. There's a little background.
The martial arts part of that, I think, is really important. Just because of the commitment and discipline that comes along with that. And I'm sure that reflects in your work, but I'm also sure your work probably reflects in your martial arts, like the mentality. I don't know if you want to comment to that at all.
You're the first one to ever say it like that. That's amazing. You're the first one to ever go, hey, does it flip the other way? Yeah, because usually I say that the martial art philosophy and the warrior stuff that I've also researched and I love and very interested in, that I always think it impacted my podcasting and my media stuff, right? My research. But it is true that my research has also impacted my martial arts. And I've started to see that there's a lot of similarities in the way that you have to approach it, because what are we talking about on a show like this? We're talking about, we're in an information war. This is 5th generation psychological warfare. Everybody just see the artichoke documents that were leaked that, probably people like Josh and I have been doing this a long time knew about, but now it's official. Okay. They're officially talking about it, that mind control is real. Right. So, and the techniques are very advanced. And if you think for a second that your government took tax money or dark money to fund mind control MK Ultra experiments in league with other nations like my own in Canada, going into Quebec and doing research there, with basically unwitting mind control victims to see if they could program a human being against their will, right? Like, think about that, right? To operate even against the fundamental laws of nature, they say, of self-preservation. So that's out. And I guess I feel like now that we're starting to see that this is where it's all going, you need a spine of a warrior to understand how to psychologically have some psychological jujitsu in the psych war that we are involved in. So that's maybe something that I can add a little more on. And I feel like it's benefited me and kept me sort of sane, I guess. I don't know. It's kept me pretty centered, at least, given me an outlet. And it's helped me not fall to the fears, the anxieties, because in something like the type of training that I do a lot of live training. I do drilling, but I'd say 10% drilling, 90% live work in a controlled type of setting, right? And what you gain in that is an insight that is a little different than the way you're taught how to think in school, where everything is like math, where it's a stationary problem that is sitting in front of you as long as you need it to in order for you to do all the equations to solve the problem. In martial arts and combat, as veterans yourselves are aware, what you're dealing with is a mathematical equation that is changing live by the nanosecond. The dynamics are changing, the pressures are changing, the back and forth is changing, the strategy is adapting in nanosecond speeds. You don't even know how to explain how the strategy is adapting because it's trained, it's programmed into your cells, it's part of your nervous system. It's like psychic level now because you've trained it so much. And you're also an instinctive being, so you're reacting on that as well. So much of that filters into when we're reading Epstein files, or we're reading about the ancient pyramids mystery, or we're reading about UFOs and UAPs or whatever the hell we're supposed to be calling them now. They keep changing the terms. There's a psychological component that you need to develop that will help you not fall prey to propaganda, which is weaponized against your emotion. It's weaponized against your fear, your anxieties, your preferred belief systems. That's a big one. So, and it also, reality distortion is one of the number one laws of psychological warfare when you're doing psychological warfare operations, or you're trying to do research into, say, cults, which I've done a hell of a lot of research into that. You see that there's an operation procedure of how to stun the mind and then have it blank and then install new programming. So, but they found out something interesting in these projects that they never say, is that you can't hypnotize somebody that is actively conscious of you trying to hypnotize them and resisting that. You can't mind control people without the drugs and the repeat. Like, you have to do a lot to the psyche to produce that, right? So if we understand the weapon, my thing is all about how do we understand the defense. And so I think as the martial artist or the warrior archetype in all us men right now, I'm sure it got kicked on in many of people listening as they've started to see the revelations that are coming out. And boy, are we just getting warmed up. And hopefully that's starting to activate something very primal and ancient in you, which is this warrior archetype that comes with a whole package that we can get into. But yeah, that's kind of where my head was at.
Phenomenal answer. Because there's not a lot of people that would understand it that way. And I think I spent a lot of time on all this different social media trying to communicate that. One of the things that I always tell my audience, David, and Josh has heard me say this before, if you're walking into social media, whether it's X, Instagram, Facebook, and you think that you're just entering a social media platform, you've already set yourself up to lose. You got to understand that you are entering into an information battle domain. Whether you're going there to have some fun or look at sports, you got to understand that everything that is populating is designed for a specific targeted audience or a targeted group. And are you one of the people that are trying to, because it's going to trigger all those mechanisms that you talked about. And I think what's interesting is I see a lot of people getting into this alt media realm with a lot of different backgrounds. You get doctors that are saying, hey, I'm going to get into this now, or military or law enforcement or researchers. And it's providing these perspectives that I think, like you said, once people know someone's trying to hypnotize them, you can't. And I think one of the variables that the evil globalists, whatever we want to call them these days, is struggling with is you have a lot of good people that are able to approach this now, not just defensively, but proactively, and say, I see where this is going. I'm going to make my audience, conscious that, hey, they're going to try to get you to think this and feel this way. And this is what this is going to look like. So all of a sudden, when that shock that you're talking about hits, they're like, hey, you know what? So-and-so told me that this was going to go down like this. And it minimizes what that shock had on them. And then we all, confidence is huge in morale. And when people realize, hey, I see everybody panicking and I'm not, because I kind of know what's going on. They get this, like you said, that archetype warrior that comes up and they're just like, hey, you know what? I can dance. All right, let's dance with the deep state here. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like that you said that. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so you mentioned something there that I found interesting. You're talking about, obviously, when we entered that domain of social media. Dude, listen to what happened to me the other day. So my son gets in the car. He's in 8th grade, 14, and he's got one of those rubber chickens, squawk, 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 rubber chickens, like a dog toy. And I'm like, what the hell you got with that for? Right? And he's got a school project where they have to make a video advertisement. And he's like, we're gonna go and we're gonna kick it around the yard, film it, and then we're gonna put music behind it, and we're gonna make an advertisement for it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I get home. I go on the TikTok and I open it up, and the first thing that popped up in my TikTok was not open during this time, was a guy with all these rubber chickens playing songs. And then the next 5 videos were all rubber chickens. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But it goes to what we're trying to prove here, is that it's not just the social media companies, it's the applications themselves and the tools of which they are utilized through. There are patents owned by Google and Meta, which listen to you, take in all of your data, including your geographical data, where that phone is on your body, the accelerometer data, when it's by your ear, when it's in your pocket, your back pocket, when you're in your toilet, where you are geographically, behavioral data. Not only that, is that these apps are designed to put out sub-acoustic tones, very similar to isotronic tones or hemisync, that put you into an alpha brainwave state to make you more susceptible for when that you do open it up. Now you're enjoying the content and you're getting a dopamine release, and you become addicted to that content and that flow that they're giving to you on your feed. And then this is where that programming actually enters. Now, David, you mentioned Project Artichoke. And in Project Artichoke, for anybody that doesn't know, this was the precursor to MK Ultra. This is 1952 to 1954. And their whole objective was, what chemical substances can we use to put people in a high fear, high anxiety, a dumbed down and very vulnerable and receptive spot so that we could program them. And they were thinking of ways to do this through food and water and pharmaceuticals and vaccines and these types of things. Well, MK Ultra was shut down in 72. But what also happened during that time? You had water fluoridation, which brought about those same exact effects in the municipal water supplies. You have the poisoning of our soil, our air, our food with various different chemicals. You have pharmaceutical grade SSRIs and antidepressants all spread throughout the municipal water supply that people are utilizing for cooking and showering and drinking. In other words, Project Artichoke never stopped. It just went into the private industry, and it's happening right now. So we wonder why we're always in this fight or flight type of scenario when it comes to information or even society and culture, and why culture is always on a standoff, ideology's on a standoff, politics are on a standoff. It's because we're in a synthetic, social engineered society. They want us in this exact point right now in society to where we're always going to have the left and the right paradigm. We're always going to have this social construct where it's us versus them.
Yeah, when you put it like that, and for people that think that's just crazy, go look it up. The patents are there, the technology's there, the research is there. I've even told friends of mine who were this was years ago. It's very rare I'm talking to people these days that aren't at least way more open-minded. But I remember talking to people a while back that said, oh, this stuff's all crazy. You guys are just paranoid schizophrenics. I said, well, hold on a second. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. You got to think about it. Even if you want to grant somebody that the CIA was just doing some innocent research because they're at war with Russia and they just need to be able to combat their mind control stuff. So, let's just say we believe the bullshit story. you would still go, well, they did do research that combined. They also did another program, because remember, MK Ultra, like you said, that was a precursor, Artichoke, but MK Ultra itself was a bunch of projects. There were many other offshoot projects that were sort of like, that was like a family of projects that all had to do with many aspects of this. And one of them, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was something else, Project Sign or Project something, Project Often, maybe. Yeah, Project Often, where they actually did, they brought in witch doctors and witches and people that could conduct seances and basically occultists. They brought them in, or people think occultists are, but these people that do this black magic shit. And they brought them in and they studied the effect of the hypnotic effect and whatever it was that they had to offer. Like, basically, do you guys have anything to offer that we could use in intelligence operations? That would be great. And you think, okay, and you look at all the layers upon layers of only what has been declassified by people spending their lives trying to wrestle it out of the classification process, right? Like, people just go online. These kids today, they're like, oh, I go, Project Artichoke was just released and reported on by the mainstream media. And they're like, yeah, cool. What's the new Roblox game update? I'm just like, okay, listen, people, like, hold on a second. You don't know the battle that has waged before your time. You don't know what it took to get here. You don't know what it took to get to Epstein files. Stop telling everybody to don't look at it. It's too dark. No. Like, you don't know what it took to get to this level of disclosure. And,
Right.
and so there's people that have known that the shit was going on and far worse for a long time. It had been just screaming inside, waiting for this day to arrive. So I just felt a little bit of like, I don't want to hear all this black pilling going on right now. This is good times. This is disclosure. It's sick. It's evil. I'm definitely desensitized at this point, sadly, from studying this for so long. Yeah, but we need to get this out, and people need to understand just how deep it is, and then realize that once you're aware, just like we were saying, Alpha, you and I were talking about this like hypnosis thing. If it's true that if you're aware, and I've done this experiment myself a few times, going to different hypnotists to test it out. If you're aware and consciously resisting, and you use your conscious logical mind to reason what's happening, you're not going to get hypnotized. If you allow this to happen, you will get hypnotized. Okay. Now you have whole industries, like Josh was pointing out, that are making biological, psychological warfare to induce you into that hypnotic state. Then you have the whole the media, the television, the colors, the flicker image, all that stuff that was going on in the early, then when the television first came out. Today, it's the algorithms, and it's the listening devices, and it's the level of technology. And so you put it all together and you go, yes. Now the question will become in your mind, and this is why everybody will walk away from it, even though it's blatant evidence is, and Josh, we've talked about this. If that's true, the question is why. The question is how long. The question is how deep and dark do you really want to fucking go? That's the question. Because if you're going to accept any of that, right? It's like that comedian. He's like, are you telling me you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? And he's like, I see, maybe not all of them, maybe not most of them, but are you telling me you don't believe in any conspiracy theory? Like that. And now people are like, oh shit, look what's going on. They're arresting royal family members and presidents of other countries right now. Wow, there must be something really deep going on, right? And you're like, yeah, it's all connected. It's all connected. And that's what I try to get into in Cult of the Medics. Alpha, if you're on chapter 1, I urge you to try to make it to the end, to chapter 10, which isn't the end. I'm still working on the last ones, because we're talking about the big picture as we go. The big picture, we start with the small picture and we zoom out to the big picture. And I just put all the theories on the table. But all you need to do is just understand that if you're seeing what's going on with these disclosures, and anybody's new to this, you're opening it up a doorway to understanding a world that was sort of pulled from your eyes. You didn't really, it was there all the time, but it's like a veil. And you've been, in many ways, it's not even just chemical stuff. Like, it's not even just the RFK stuff. It's the psychological warfare that is part of this as well. The constant anxiety of the next thing coming all the time, the doomsday, the keeping you in fear, existential fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the path to the dark side. The elite know that. They're using that as a weapon to hide behind fear, because they're the ones living in fear. The best people to use fear as a weapon are people that understand fear on a level that you don't even know, right? So I guess that's why I'm not a black pill. because I see how this thing operates, and it operates in a very fearful way. If it was so powerful, as it is very powerful, but if it was as powerful as everybody grants it, why does it operate in such a fear-based methodology and strategy? Why is it conspiratorial? Why is it seditious? And they have to do gaslighting and they have to manipulate. Like, what energy is that? That's not the energy of people who are alphas, people who are, let's just get it all out right in the open. Like, that's not how these people. So we're dealing with the betas in the room up here that just pretend. Emperor has no clothes. You know, someone killed the king and stole his robes and is pretending to be the king. That's what happened. So
You know, when you as you describe, you know, these occultists or these evil people, you know, whatever the proper term is, I look back on, you know, my history as a detective, right? Did it for a decade and a half, working homicides, working gangs, and, you know, Southern California, like, we got some bad criminals out here. But one of the things that and you know, we all have a path that has brought us to where we're at today. And, you know, if you recognize that, you can see how things that seem like chaos in your life are actually in perfect alignment of a big picture when you look back at it. And when I look at the things that I experienced, the one thing that I recognize from the world of law enforcement to battling, you know, these deep state people, right? That's a term that everybody's pretty familiar with. Was the criminals I dealt with, the majority of them, not all, because there are some very sinister ones, but the majority of them are people that, you know, they have these impulses they can't control. And this is what allows us to catch them. What I realized as I started to study these deep state people, these globalists, these are people that have that same criminal mindset, but they can control their impulses. They can think logically. They can plan. They are patient. They do understand the battlefield. They're not relying on luck of not, like, these people are geniusly evil. And I remember thinking, this is terrifying. Like, knowing that this is what we're battling, you know, this is terrifying. So we have to be able to find their weak spots, because every criminal has a weak spot. It's like in battle. You're gonna go and you're gonna fight a great opponent, but nobody's perfect. So who's gonna find the Achilles heel of the opponent first? You know? And when I look at these deep state people, that's what I'm looking for. And then once we find it, how do we articulate that so that an audience understands it, so they can deploy it in their own personal battles? And it's really made this chessboard of, you know, going back and forth with these people. It's been terrifying and fascinating at the same time.
Man, Alpha, you and I are going to hit it off great. That was awesome. Really enjoyed that. And I'm glad, and from a detective, like, it's nice for me to hear it, because I've never been in policing, or I've interviewed detectives. I've spoken to them. I studied all of Ted Gunderson's stuff. My colleague, Michael Tessarian, knew Ted Gunderson and spoke with him many times and met him, you know. So, and there's been others that have done these kind of exposures on this deep, dark world you're talking about, where it's, and I love how you described it, working with the average everyday human that is a fallen human, right, is a totally different game than dealing with what we're talking about, which are like apex predator sharks, man. These are cunning James Bond villains that I bet you Hollywood's been telling us the truth the whole time, and then the news was what was lying. I think it's all flipped, right? They just tell you in a mythological way, of course, but it's still the truth nonetheless, I think, you know? Like, so you kind of get this hint that, okay, there's a criminal world. And this is how I start with people, to try to get them to see, at least, like, I don't like to convince people. I don't like the culty vibes of anything. I'm not trying to, like, preach at people or say, hey, I know all the answers. The reason I called my show Truth Warrior was because it was like, that was the goal. I aspire towards warriorship, and I aspire towards finding out the truth of reality. Right. So you're not always correct. Like, we're just the little people here trying to look at what the adults in the room are doing. Right. But there's a lot that we've found out. I'm here to give everybody good news. If you're just waking up right now, there's a whole bunch of human beings that have spent their lives, many dedicated their lives, many have lost their lives in this battle. Many have been professionally assassinated and smeared. And you read their Wikipedias, and it's all lies, man. Because they want to curate your information, just like they want to curate where you're going on the internet and then map out so it's the same thing. And when you were bringing up that thing about the cunning predators, I started to feel this vibe when I did the cult research, because when that's what got me to that next level. Because I was with you, I was like, well, there's definitely fallen people that maybe they were abused as kids. Like we hear this about the pedo thing. Well, pedos are probably were abused by a pedo, right? It's like a virus, you know, or whatever. And you go, okay, but they're fully grown adults. And I know many fully grown adults that have been abused, that were foster kids, probably got a lot of abuse. And they actually turned out okay. And they got families and jobs, and they're not pedos, and they're not serial rapists and killers. And you know, so then this whole, I started, because I rejected the religious explanation of it for a long time. And then I found a comfy middle, you know, between the psychology and the more, you know, deep consciousness, Carl Jung, maybe even some of the more paranormal aspects of what's producing evil. Right. But I felt at the very least there's degrees. And there's another quick thing I'll say. I've been writing this article series on my Substack. I've been writing a series on a presentation series I did, like a video presentation series on cults. I called it Cults of Death and Power. It's a 4-part, I don't know how many hours it is, but 4-part series on my Substack. And then I'm writing an article series about it for people that prefer to read. And sometimes you can write things you can't really say. And I get into this one story of this. He was a criminal psychologist that worked in tandem with FBI and police departments. And what he would do is do psychological analysis. And he got into the research of studying brain scans of killers and serial killers. And so he was studying, like, what is a psychopath? That was his whole curiosity. So he's going through all of these different scans, MRI scans of brains, and he's noticing, oh, there's like black spots in certain parts of the brain. There's differences in the prefrontal neocortex, the frontal lobes, or, you know, and he's getting into all this like materialist analysis. And there might be an element of that can produce these things. But then it gets weird for him. And he's going through all these different scans, and he finds this one that was like the worst one of all. It was worse than one of the cases where someone had killed like 11 people, like in a serial killer manner. That brain scan looked worse, he said. Turns out it was his own brain scan. So he went, hold on a minute. I'm not a serial killer psychopath. Like, was I dropped on my head as a kid? Like, what the hell? What's this? How's that? So it totally changed his whole research. I think it's Jim Fallon or James Fallon. He's a PhD. He worked in criminal psychology forever. So anyways, I start with this case just to illustrate. And then you get into these stories of traffic accidents where people lose like 3/4 of their physical brain matter. And they're walking and playing baseball and living life. And you're like, what? You know? And there's even genetic disorders that should make somebody completely mentally just screwed, right? No, not in every case. So there's this weird department of like psychology now that's going, well, we can't just blame evil on the physical brain and all these experiences. And you can't only blame everything on trauma, like past trauma. It's a huge component. We can get into how big of a component I think it is. But in this field, I went, there's also the fact that they're missing a moral, or maybe even what you could call a spiritual element to this, because there's layers. If you're dealing with criminals like that are just, they're drug addicts, they're gang members, maybe cartel members that are they've been raised since boys killing things and turned into psychopaths, right? There's like humans have been turned bad, right? Rotten humans, but maybe you could say they can't be recovered to a full degree, but they're nothing like this level. Think about it. This level, like the shit you're reading about in Epstein files and Wiener laptops, and just go into all that, you know, whatever that is, Boys Town University. We're talking about organized, financed, international in scope, involving multiple governments and big international roundtable bodies, military people, Bilderberg attendees. We're getting all this shit on Bohemian Grove coming out right now too. And they're involved late night comedians, actors and actresses in Hollywood. Like, we're talking what we look at as the creme de la creme. Yeah, we always go, yeah, they probably went to some Diddy parties and some freaking Coke parties and did a little satanic Ouija board shit on the Friday night after doing some shrooms. Like, okay, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about generational family bloodline ritual cult in league with intelligence agencies, in league with BlackRock and big financial institutions, in league with media moguls and people that make movies in Hollywood, in league with Pentagon officials, in league with people in the EU. right? And on we can go. And then you got to go, wait a minute, let's just talk about the pandemic. Let's just talk about so many of these instances that you go, the level of planning, the level of diabolical intent, if there's any level of malicious or criminal intent, is unfathomable to somebody that's just going to be said, well, maybe he was bullied as a kid or some shit. Like, it's way darker than that. Human trafficking, organ harvesting, the children, the pedophilia, the pedivore stuff, the stuff we're just getting into. This has been known. This has been documented. It wasn't just in the Q posts. It wasn't just in WikiLeaks. We've known about this for a long time, and it's just coming out now to a wider audience. And so now we've got to contend with the greatest question of all time. Philosophers have juggled with it. Theologians have battled it. Scientists have tried to say it's just because of genetics and determinism. And we're just talking about the question of the origins and nature of evil. That is the question. The word is accurate. The word is appropriate given what we're looking at. So, and maybe there's gradients, maybe there's levels, but when we're talking the most powerful people in the world engaged in planned, astrologically timed rituals, listen to some of these actors that came out talking about how the level of this, the elite level of this, is something otherworldly. That's how it's been described. It's something otherworldly. And I went, okay, I've seen enough. When you put that next to all the other research that we're going to get into, a deep, dark world, but also an incredible world, because think about it, we're still here. There's still people that have been able to bring the light out and bring the truth out. There's a battle happening. There's pushback happening. There's people waking up all over the place. There's people in government. There's people that everybody's not suspecting at all of ever being part of the good guys that are coming out and doing good things. And I think that spirit works in mysterious ways. And that's why I think we're in for some absolutely epic times coming up in the next months and years.
I think a lot of what you're saying in that last part there is that you talk about the gradients of evil or the degrees of evil, and that you and I had on Earth Chronicles David Icke on, and we talked about this, that what is at the center of the web, what is controlling this, what is the bigger picture that nobody's seeing. And even David Icke, for many years said it was reptilians or whatever. He said, I have my thoughts that it's interdimensional or something of this nature, but I don't know. And that's the scary part. But I believe that there's people here on this planet who do know, who do understand what that is. Yeah. But also, the context of what we're talking about here is that many of these people, they are raised in it. It's within their bloodlines, as David was saying. Other people are introduced to it. A lot of people are brought into it through compromise. A lot of people are forced into it because of honeypotting operations or something that happens to them where they get compromised and they don't want to feel embarrassed and they don't want to lose their position of power. So they go along with it. And what I think is happening right now with a lot of these people that are turning against that system is, I've always talked about it as the multi-headed Hydra. You have all these heads of the Hydra. They have different ideologies and each one has their own faction. And for the longest time, you had the satanic cabal that's been around for thousands and thousands of years that held all the cards and all the power. And if you wanted to be a player in the world, if you wanted to be one of those factions that rose up, you had to play their game and you had to get into their world and their society. Well, what happened? 2017, 2016, things changed. We took back the idea of information, which is the largest component of all warfare. And when you start to take back that information, you go back to trauma-based mind control. You go back to all aspects of mind control. What are they trying to control? They're trying to control our thoughts because our thoughts produce our actions. And now if they're trying to control our thoughts, why? Well, because our thoughts are powerful. And that if all of us begin to wake up and start using our thoughts, and this is where their fear comes from, this is why they project it back to us, is that if we all begin to wake up and realize that we overpower them, that we are far greater in power than them, they lose. And that was always their biggest fear. And that's what we are on the cusp of right now, because we took back that idea of information. So what you're seeing is a branching off. These factions are now abandoning their structure and going to something that is more aligned towards humanity, the golden age of humanity, technological innovation, spiritual evolution. And they're seeing the light. And I think that a lot of what you're seeing right now with people turning is due to this. They were just controlled factions that are now like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm getting away from you guys. I'm going to help expose as much of this as possible.
I don't know if you guys got to see the clip of Hillary Clinton coming out after she did her testimony today.
I saw that. I just watched the one before I came on where she walks off the press, basically when they start asking her some deep questions. I didn't get the whole. Was that the one?
Yeah, that's the one. I'll play the last 40 seconds of it because the entire clip's like 4.5 minutes. But the reason it caught my attention is, she spends the first, the pretty much the majority of, this soundbite to the press playing. Yeah, they asked me this. It was stuff that I already told them. They already know this. She keeps, because I listen to this through the lens of an interrogation, right? And it's funny as I'm listening to you guys talk about a lot of this stuff in law enforcement. When you get into the detective level, they actually send us to a course. It's called BATI, the Behavior Analysis Training Institute, where we learn in these interrogation techniques, the touch, the closeness, reading the body language, up and left, up and right, like, all these pupil dilations, establishing baselines. Like, it's so much that goes into it. And so you don't get to turn it off for like the rest of your life. It's just there in every conversation you participate in, even up into when you're watching a video clip, right? And so I'm listening to her in the beginning of this part, and she's talking about this stuff, and it's nonchalant. But then she gets to the end. So I'm gonna play this for you guys. This last 40 seconds. She brings up a topic we've all heard about, and I'll explain to you why this caught my attention here.
Him about the allegations, in his view, about Russia's involvement in my election in 2016. So at the very end of this hearing, after I made that point, I want to commend Chairman Comer for raising a series of significant questions that I responded to about the nature of the investigation and the areas that I thought should be explored. So I appreciated that. I want to see the truth come out. So that was a reassuring way to end a very long, repetitive deposition.
All right, so I didn't go far back enough. So let me go back a little bit before that. Let me take it to about the 3-minute mark, because she says it towards the end, and I want you guys to hear it. Let me try it now.
Deposed. And in fact, the Republican members didn't even show up for the deposition of Les Wexner. And when I said that, I had to point out that the only questions that any Republican member asked of any of the people they deposed was of former Attorney General Bill Barr, when Chairman Comer asked him about the allegations, in his view, about Russia's involvement in my election.
All right, didn't go far back enough.
I think I got the clip you're talking about.
All right, bring it up then.
I think I got the clip you're talking about.
It then got, at the end, quite unusual, because I started being asked about UFOs and a series of questions about Pizzagate, one of the most vile, bogus conspiracy theories. It then got...
Okay.
That's the one.
All right.
So,
Wow.
Listen, when these elite criminals, it's like the serial killer that likes to go back to the crime scene. When these people that have so much power and no one's ever been able to leverage things against them because they're that powerful and they're just that evil. There's this, I talked about confidence on the good side. Well, that confidence exists on the dark side as well. And that's her coming out saying, Pizzagate, yeah, ridiculous. You're not going to catch me. You guys don't have the information. I'm going to say it because most people aren't going to bring up something that was offensive coming right out of that event. Maybe down the line, the transcript gets released, it gets brought up in questioning, but that's not something you're going to bring. This was a highlight for her in that testimony she was giving.
I think there's also another point here.
Interesting.
Is that I think that her confidence also comes from the fact that she knows the players and actors involved in the whole organization, of which brings her this sense of security because those people are probably still in power.
They were
And
probably
Trump is
trying
not going to, the DOJ and Trump aren't going to risk taking those people down by taking her down. I think that maybe that's the way that she perceives it.
imagine being in her position and someone's asking a question to her and she knows, I know what you did. To the person that's asking her the questions. She knows that they can only take it so far because if she goes down, they go down. And if there's a large portion of our government that's been corrupted through compromise and stuff like that, I mean, it's dark.
Well, Alpha, I'm sure in your line of work, you've dealt with people that'll very convincingly and very confidently and very casually and very affirmatively lie to your face and just be like, I didn't do it. There's no way. You don't got nothing. That's ridiculous that you would even think of me being like they're so emphatic that it almost sounds convincing to somebody that doesn't have any experience talking to psychopaths, right?
I've interviewed people where I already seen the evidence, the video surveillance of them committing the crime. And we still do the interview with them to lock them into the statement. And I come out of there being, if I didn't see that video, they would have convinced me.
Wow.
Like that person is so good that and then the entire time I'm going through this interview, I got to remind myself, like, you saw them do it on the camera.
Right.
Like
right.
you witnessed it, but it just, there's just something different about these people that some of them are able to pull this off.
And they figured out that everybody's ripe for that plucking. Like that's a bit of a blind spot. It's funny, like evil figured out that virtue is our blind spot, right? Like the way that a prey animal's base instinct of just going to get that water from that water hole is going to override maybe the level of caution that they would need to see that there's a cat in the friggin' bush over there, right? Like looking at them. So, it's interesting. If we're dealing with like you could call it like a predatory element within our own species, or getting into the other bigger questions beyond that. Like, how do you, like, we can go psychopath, but again, what is a psychopath? Is it just genetic? Is it brain? Is the way the brain is in the lobes? Are we conduits? Is that the research then? The conduit theory that like human bodies and brains are conduits for light and energy and signal and all that, right? And if that's the case, is psychopathy and some of that stuff, is there something even deeper that can explain the motivations behind it? Who knows? And then we're talking, okay, someone that lied that they murdered their cousin in cold blood or something versus, I mean, the Clinton body count and the very, I guess all the ideas we have about how dark that Clinton rabbit hole is. If even a fraction of it is true, we're dealing with something very evil that's beyond your average street criminal. We're dealing with something very, and then also remember, even the Clintons, even the Epsteins are just a drop in the bucket of what's there in terms of this network, if this is truly international in scope. Now, one of the things I want to bring up really quickly that really got me, like I've done interviews for years with people. I've interviewed everybody that has claims of saying, I spoke to my Pleiadian grandmother, whatever channel. I've spoken to people that have had what I feel are like more legitimate paranormal experiences. I've spoken to people that have been victims of satanic ritual abuse right in Ontario, Canada, where I used to live. Some crazy stories there. I have spoken to people that have been involved with some of the Masonic lodges locally and have had very, very crazy experiences with some of these people. Not to say all are like that, but just in my neck of the woods, and there's definitely an element there. And there's one interview that has always stuck out to me, and it was the hardest interview for me to release. And it's an interview I just re-released, and it's with a woman named Jane. And I spoke about this with Josh years ago when I did it. but I just want to bring it up because this is a much better time for her story than when I released it. I think it never went super viral. I think I got that interview up to maybe 30,000 views. And that's amazing for Canada. Like, but she is a Canadian. She's still alive. She lives in Ontario, and it's not her real name, but it's an anonymous name. And she brought the sauce for her life experience of being a survivor of human trafficking and being involved in the prostitution, but like elite prostitution network. And she was trafficked across from the age of like, she was basically born into this family. She calls it the family. It's an international crime ring. It's involved not just in sex trafficking and human trafficking, but in weapons, drugs, the whole thing. They're involved with Russian mob. They're involved with Chinese triads. They're involved with all kinds of stuff. And she was raised as somebody to be one of these prostitutes from a young age. And she told very vivid stories. And the way you see her do the interview, I'd love to send it to you, Alpha, just for your experience, to just be like, you tell me if this woman is bullshit. Didn't give me any indication. And she has piles of documented evidence of all her hospital visits, of the FBI reports, of meetings she had with parliamentarians in Canada. Like, her case has been knocked around for decades and never any justice. She has boxes full of stuff. She even told me she's got like phones still in her possession from some of her clients, or clients like that she was forced to go and deal with. Right. And anyways, she keeps going deeper into it and tells me, well, this is a very elite group that works in the media, that works in the government, and she starts just laying it out. And I'm like, and this is a woman that I had to tell her who Jeffrey Epstein was, because she's so much in her own thing. She wasn't, like, at the time aware of it. And I'm like, this is the time, because all this stuff is coming out. And that's the claim, is that there's an international ring and it's very elite. It's not just some low level biker gang. She goes, no, biker gangs and the locals are very much just the foot soldiers for these very high powerful groups. And she says, it like, the story she has is so heartbreaking, and the evidence she gave me. And then she told me, she's like, these groups are still active. They're very local. They're very active. And they're people in power in Canada still on both sides of the aisle. There's people involved that are still in power on both sides of the aisle. Now, this was while Trudeau was in, but Carney, same lineage, same team. So you go, well, now we're learning all this revelations about Epstein files, and you put it all together with the entire research community of, for say, 60 years that has gone on into this particular field. Look at what's going on in the UK with the grooming gangs and that element. And you start looking at the world a little bit differently. And you get into what's going on in China, where they're literally kidnapping children and then killing them and then harvesting their organs and selling them on the black market. Like, the level of evil we don't even contemplate, right? Well, that interview made it go, wow, this is in my home. I always knew Canada was bad, but the way she tells me, and we've had many off-air conversations that go even deeper, stuff we couldn't talk about. It gets very specific. And I'm like, my life is at risk with this information. Like, that was the vibe. That was the level of it when I released it. But I said, fuck it, I'm doing it. I took 2 weeks to press post. And then I put it up and it went out. And then I wove it into my Cult of the Medics, her story. And then it'd been a few years, and then all the files came out and the stuff I started reading, I'm like, my God, she was telling me this stuff completely outside of any Q, Trump, Epstein files or any of that shit. Just a local person that has her own personal life story files. Like, she has boxes of evidence, and she sent me hard drives and stuff. Like, it's crazy. So anyways, that was my thing. And so I've re-released it, and I'm hoping that now that story can get more views, because I'll bet you there's way more of her. And on this other side of that, I've also heard a lot of bullshit artists out there that are saying that they're victims, and they're coming out right now. You got to be careful out there. You got to use discernment.
Jeffrey Epstein's niece.
Yeah. Like, everybody's now a victim. Like, don't forget, there's going to be a lot of divas that want the attention. Okay. So, but there's the real ones, and we need people like Alpha and Josh and good people with discernment to be able to spot the difference of someone that's bullshitting you. I think this woman is the most credible person I've interviewed. So that's just my story.
You know,
And I think that we
victim-
actually interviewed Jane together on Earth Chronicles, if I'm correct.
That's
on
right.
that.
Didn't we?
We did. And I remember her story, which was profound. But now going into that is the fakes out there. There's every single one of them I've seen on X is a fake. I mean, you have that one that calls herself Epstein's niece, and she starts talking about the occult. And if you just if you know anything about the occult and you start to listen to these people, you can easily show that they're full of shit because they have no idea what they're talking about, and they don't give details about things. They use generics, they use big names, they try to associate with everybody. It gets to be nonsensical, and it's sad that people push this stuff, whether it's intentional or not, but it really deviates away from the truth. I mean, going into this and going to the dark aspect of what David was just talking about there is you have John of God. If everybody remembers John of God, I mean, he treated Bill Clinton with healing. He was on Oprah dozens of times. He was running a prostitution ring, human trafficking ring in Brazil on his 100-acre plus property. And on there, the women would get pregnant. So what did he do? He started baby farms. And you know what they said the reason for these baby farms were? Well, it's just way easier to get these babies into human trafficking rings. The same thing with the finders and the CIA and the family. Well, guess what? You know how much it costs to raise a baby to be a teenager or into an adolescence? That's a lot of money and a lot of time and resources. Guys, they're not creating baby farms to raise them. They're creating baby farms to sell them to pharmaceutical companies for research, to sell them to Planned Parenthood, to utilize the body parts, to organ harvest, or something much deeper and darker.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like the story Ted Gunderson tells of when he was told by so many of the victims he had interviewed. And Ted Gunderson was the FBI director in Los Angeles during his day, right? So this isn't just some Joe Schmo. And he brought out very credible information, I think. And he said that there was basically a flight route that was known back to Washington and wherever they wanted kids from. And they would have them flown in. And this is where you're reading about all these emails about flying in, like, was it $60,000 hot dog parties? Look, if you think the elites are sitting around eating jerky, hot dogs, and pizza all the time, I don't know what to tell you. They have personal chefs. They don't eat the mutton food of the plebes. Okay. This is something different. This is coded bullshit. This is coded.
It absolutely is. I want to break for a commercial. I'd let the time get away from me because I was enjoying the conversation so much. And when we come back from this commercial, and I want to buy you some time to get your setup too, Josh, I want to talk about, my personal role coming into this with the background and the things that I know that a lot of civilians don't know, and how this education needs to make its way into the law enforcement community. And I'll explain why, and why people like you guys could be so beneficial. When you said something earlier, David, with regards to Jane's interview, that wasn't necessarily the right time for it to come out. And if you would have presented law enforcement agencies with what I'm going to say on the other end of this commercial, that wouldn't have been the right time either. It would have been dismissed. But right now is a prime opportunity. So I'll go first on mine, Josh, and then that should buy you the remaining time you need to get yours set up. You're going to see a QR code up on my Rumble side, folks. So listen up to the fellas that are out there. Quick question. Did you know that your nitric oxide levels start dropping big time once you hit your late 20s and 30s? Like, you can lose over half your production by the time you're 40. This is uncomfortable. Why does this matter? Because it's the reason why your pumps don't hit the same, your endurance dips, and you just don't feel as fired up during workouts. I've been using this stuff called Blood Flow 7, and it's a total game changer. It helps your body boost nitric oxide naturally, which means better circulation, better oxygen flow, and way better workouts. You'll feel it: fuller muscles, more stamina, quicker recovery. But not just about the gym. Healthy blood flow supports your heart, your focus, and even your energy throughout the day. It's like the natural boost of energy that leaves you feeling good. No chemicals, no crash, just clean, sustained performance and energy. If you want to get your edge back and feel that pump again, check out Blood Flow 7 by visiting bloodflow7, that's the number 7.com/alpha. Hit the link below and grab some Blood Flow 7 today. Again, that's Blood bloodflow7.com/alpha. Get it while it's 30% off and see what it does for you. When you guys go and visit the website, you're going to see some phenomenal testimonials that are there from all kinds of people from different ages, and some that are men, some that are women, and it's definitely going to motivate you to try it. So again, you guys, bloodflow7.com/alpha. That link will be down in the description, and it'll be in the live chat now, and the floor is yours, Josh, and then I'll tell you guys about something I think will help in law enforcement. You're on mute. Still on mute. We can't hear you, Josh.
It's still muted. I can see it muted, actually. Oh, there he is.
I'm in my Rumble studio hitting mute back and forth.
That's it.
Oh my God, that was funny. Okay, give me a second here. Yeah, we can do one of these. Why don't we pull this one up right now? I like these guys. They're always good to me. So I want to tell you about something that's not well known, but it's incredibly powerful. It's called Aceman An. It's a compound from aloe vera that massively supports your body's stem cell production, cell health, immune system function that matters because your body replaces about 1% of its cells every day. As we age and we have health issues, we produce cells less efficiently. The thing is, almost no aloe products have Aceman An because it breaks down after harvest and you can't get enough of it from eating raw aloe because of the laxative compounds. However, Emerald Med created a stabilized Aceman An supplement with a laxative compound removed. It's called Aloe RX. They made it from 4 pharmacies, and it's now available to the public. I want to explain the value of Aloe RX. Stem cell injections can have amazing results, but still can cost $10,000 to $40,000 for treatment. Aloe RX isn't the same thing as stem cell injections, but it massively supports your body's stem cell production for less than $100. You could literally give your body this for 16 years at the same price as one stem cell treatment. For people who don't need something extreme like stem cell injections, but want to help their body significantly, this is arguably the best value on the market. The longer you take it, the more compounding support you have. If you want to support a company that supports our channel plus free speech with ads, check out Emerald Med's Aloe RX. Click on the link below to learn more and get 30% off Aloe RX today.
I appreciate you guys. And do us a favor, you guys, support the people that support these shows that allow us to keep this content free and allow us to put food on the table for our families. So now, to a deep state nightmare, why should they have prevented Alfred from getting into this community with you guys? Because I come from a background that I was very privy to stuff that the normal cops, aren't necessarily aware to. I was considered an expert in search warrants. I've testified as an expert in court. I've been on the task force. I've been on the dynamic teams. I've worked undercover. I've done these things, the wiretap training. And at the time, this was great. I was like, this is awesome, because my perception was these are us good guys that are using these tools to go and help fight evil. And now that I'm on this side of the fence, I look at these tools and I'm like, holy shit, I know who has access to these things. And one that I'm going to talk about, and these are all over the country. The country's split up into regions. And out here in the Southwest, we have something known as LA Clear. And you guys can go look this up. This is open source information. Just people don't look for it because they just don't know about it. And LA Clear does a lot of great training for law enforcement. And I'm sure the majority of the people that work there are well-intentioned. However, one of the things that it was created for was back in the days when you guys watch these old cop movies, you would see an undercover get into a shootout with another undercover because they didn't realize that they were both working undercover, from the same mission. And so, and I think that a lot of these movies and TV shows were to facilitate law enforcement with agreeing to creating this thing, like LA Clear and others. And what this is when I was a detective, and I was working gangs, and I'm going to run surveillance on a particular residence or a particular person, I go and I call LA Clear. And I say, hey, this is Detective Luna. From this day to this day, I'm going to be running surveillance on this address, for John Smith. And, it's regarding a homicide crime or attempted homicide. And so I'm doing my business. Well, let's just say another detective or a different agency comes in and they call in and say, hey, we're going to run surveillance on address 123. Well, it populates. Hey, time out. There's already law enforcement involved in surveillance of this location. Let me contact, that detective, and maybe you guys can link up, or maybe they'll say no. And then it goes based off the higher crime or the operation that's larger. So on the surface, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds great. It does. Until you realize if you have the highest elite people in these federal agencies in the DOJ that can tap into, because they have the clearance to tap into this stuff. Now they know every route to take not to get caught. If we happen to find one of their trafficking houses, they're immediately going to get the alert. And if it's not somebody they don't want to sacrifice, they can move the good people, they can sacrifice the bad person. They have the complete upper hand. It's literally like allowing the top echelon of the ultimate crime, international crime syndicate to know everything law enforcement's doing from the good guys. And that's extremely dangerous. Now, that being said, you have two options. If you collapse the system, well, now you do disrupt law enforcement, because this has been the way for a very long time. And you do open the opportunity, to run into blue on blue type crimes. But this is what you can do. They can go, and they have the ability with the tech that we have now to reverse search everybody that's ever tapped into this organization and where it came from. So you can now, because you weren't looking for bad guys before, because you're like, oh yeah, the DOJ looked into us. No big deal. They're the DOJ. Now you can go and look and be like, the DOJ wasn't running surveillance on this house. Why'd they look into it? And now you can reverse these investigations. I personally believe this is already happening.
I wonder. Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's some good information that Trump DOJ would need to know.
Exactly.
Well, wasn't it the whole, that's fascinating, man. Because I've always thought there's weapons on the battlefield, right? It's all about who picks them up and uses them. So if we had, say, patriots within the system, or good people that wanted to save their country, or wanted to save the police, the corruption of policing, or whatever it is, people motivated to try to make a difference, they would also, or maybe it could be that they got motivated because they saw that if nothing was done, we wouldn't have, America wouldn't be here, our country wouldn't be here, Western civilization. So it's like maybe some people saw that, hey, something needs to be done. They have access to those same tools. And I'm thinking even in the intelligence services as well, like the NSA, the CIA, etc. All the tools that they started building to surveil the population could be used to surveil the deep state, could be used to surveil these cults, these secret societies, right? And by the way, these secret societies being a part of politics goes back to George Washington and before. Like it's all documented, right? So for anybody to think that sounds like, well, no, this is something that happens. People that are working behind, and they have these nocturnal clubs and these allegiances and cults and whatnot, get into positions of power and then bring the cult doctrine into the position, into the politics, right? It's the same with the criminals. Like it's an infection that can spread. But what about the immune response? What about the people that are like really good cops that want to do their job, want to fight evil? Like what about them? Are they so outnumbered by people that are involved or dirty? Or is it the same thing we saw during COVID, where many well-intentioned good people, maybe their biggest crime was cowardice, or they didn't want to speak out, or they didn't want to do anything to fight back, but they still believed that it was wrong what they were doing, right? Like many of these doctors and nurses and whatnot that have come out, or government officials. So I wonder that. I always wonder, like, what level is, because everybody instantly thinks all this stuff, intelligence tech, even the black projects and the secret projects and the classified information, we automatically think that's all evil things.
I think,
you know what I mean?
You're saying, one of the things that's going to accelerate that, because I shared with you before the show, and most of my audience knows, I'm very new to being awakened. It was 2019 when the Epstein suicide. I'm just like, wow, okay, who is this dude? Why are people wearing shirts saying that this dude didn't kill himself? Like, what's the big deal? We went down the rabbit hole and we're here. But the reason I share that story is I consider myself, a pretty smart guy, pretty well-rounded, tapped into. At the time, I was watching Fox, I was watching CNN, I was a normie. And I thought I knew everything that was going on, especially knowing I'm getting intelligence briefs, working on these task force on what's going on at the border and these different things. I look back now and I was like, dude, you didn't know anything about what was going on in the real world. And why I share that is now granted, this is going back to 2018, 2019. A lot has happened in the last 6-7 years. But people have to understand, you have a lot of good law enforcement that still are operating in that mindset where I used to be. You have to have something in our culture, in our country, happens that grabs the attention of even the majority of law enforcement till they're just like, hey, what? Like, what's going on? I think we're approaching that. Now, what's key about that is when that happens, when the good guys realize, because all cops know, yeah, there's always these bad eggs that live in these institutions. The media capitalizes on that when they see it. But if you tell law enforcement across the country, hey, your ranks are infiltrated by people that are pretending to be good, and these guys now know to be more aware of not just the general stuff you're looking for, but things definitely out of the ordinary, the acceleration of people getting caught internally is going to be very rapid because everybody's looking. And that's going to.
Do you think some of that, sorry to jump on that, but just do you think some of that's going on, maybe even other countries right now, which is why we're seeing some of these arrests and resignations? Like, do you think maybe some of that isn't, it's because let's just say we all thought, wow, the most elite people are being named in these files from different countries and industries, the royals, like, so who's going to arrest them? Like, they are the kings and queens. So but now they're getting arrested. So that must mean, and then I always tell people that think, oh, nothing's ever happening. I'm like, well, the Epstein thing didn't expose itself. Like, somebody did that. Somebody slowly leaked this out over time. It didn't just expose itself. So that must mean there are good people trying to get this out. And like you said, the more of that, like I think of it in terms of the public, because I'm a member of the public, but you guys were in like government offices and, like the police and the military. So like you can think like that as well. And I think, well, in the public, it works the same way, where I'm just trying to talk to the average Joe and say, hey, bro, do you know where all your tax money is going? How do you feel about that? Shouldn't something be like, that's how I talk to them. But maybe your conversations are, hey, bro, you signed up to, back the Constitution, law and order, justice, fight evil. Just so happens that we have enemies within our midst that have infiltrated key positions, and we're finding out about that. Like, I feel like that is part of the accelerant process. It's not just this one little team going around and arresting everybody. It's about awakening people so that happens through the system. And then the safeguards in the system that used to be there to protect it can start waking up again and actually fighting back.
Here's it be it circumstantial, but I think I would say this is a very educated speculation I'll provide right now. As horrific as some of the stuff that we've seen that's been released in the Epstein files, none of it reaches the threshold of anything that would warrant an arrest yet. Warrant investigations, yes, but there's nothing there that crosses a threshold of probable cause for an arrest, let alone, most detectives and special agents, cops operate at probable cause. Detectives, special agents, they operate off of what's known as, what goes to the jury instructions, because what you need for a conviction is it's a far greater threshold than what you need just for a simple arrest.
Right.
So if we know that, but we're seeing presidents in other countries get arrested, we're seeing people from the royal family get arrested, what this indicates to me is there have been investigations that are already happening at the lower level of people flipping on people that are flipping on people. And the release of these files are a way of pushing the court of public opinion to be like, well, this makes sense, as opposed to a legitimate investigation that doesn't have media hype behind it would be like, well, we need to know more. But right now there's so much hype to this that it's like, well, yeah, look at this crazy stuff we're reading. I'm telling people right now, to arrest the people that are being arrested right now that have that notoriety, you have to have a concrete mound of evidence. Which means people are talking. It's not simply paperwork.
So
I'm so glad. Oh, sorry, Josh, just really quick, because I'm just so glad you said that. I was just having a debate with somebody about this, where they were saying that, that's all they've got is just that. And I'm like, no, that's not the primary case evidence, bro. They're just letting you in on it and giving you just, this is drip. This is just, hey, everybody, just sort of letting you know. But there's shit going on behind the scenes. There's no way that this was authorized release. There's no way it got to this point, like you said, without there being probably maybe even years behind this going on. So anyways, Josh.
So right after the Epstein files were released, and I just want to make sure that my audience on Rumble is no longer hearing that echo. I apologize. So when I was screwing that ad up, I unmuted myself on Rumble. So it was like double audio. So I apologize. Hopefully that's fixed. But just a few. So about a week after the Epstein files were released, a few representatives from the Trump administration went to the UK and they met with Keir Starmer. And then a week later is when Andrew Mountbatten Windsor got arrested. So what I want to show people is that what you saw in the Epstein files, even though there's an email pertaining to him sharing classified information, that's not what he was arrested for. In other words, there's other files that they have, and they're going out there, and this is why these people are getting taken down. Now, when you start to realize that, what you begin to see is that Trump is utilizing this for leverage. At least that's my perspective on it. Is that why wouldn't you? If you have the whole world who's against you, who wants to kill you and who wants to remove you, but you have the ultimate leverage over them and that you can shape the world into a construct that they no longer can manipulate if you can just utilize that leverage and keep them in tow. And this is why we see factions deviating away from the satanic elite. Hey, maybe he went to King Charles and is like, hey, I got the info on you too, but we're going to take down your brother that set an example, and that now you're going to fall in line with what we're doing. And it was at the same time that Marco Rubio came out and he was at the Munich summit, the Munich Security Summit. And he said, look, remember 2 weeks before the Munich Security Summit, Trump was in Davos. And Trump said, the rules-based international order is dead. In other words, the New World Order, the NGOs, the think tanks, Chatham House, right, the Club of Rome, all of what they set up in the beginning of the 20th century as this intermediary above government that does all rules and policies and regulations and laws, and then they distribute their people in the governments, and then they progress their own agenda. That was dead. That's what happened in Davos. They came out and they said it's dead. You just saw Ray Dalio come out and said the rules-based international order is dead. And then Marco Rubio goes to Munich and comes out and says, look, Europe, it's not that we want to abandon you. We don't. We prefer to work with you, but you got to fix your shit if you want to work with us. And so they gave him an ultimatum. They basically told him that your agenda, your globalist agenda is dead. And we're moving forth because guess what? We got all the energy, we got all the money, we're controlling the economy, and we got the biggest damn military in the world, and we're not afraid to use it. If you want to freaking question that, go look at Venezuela. And then the next part is, if you want to join us, we're willing and ready, but you got to change your guys' ways. And I think that that's pretty spectacular because this is what Alpha and I have talked about for the last year of what was going to be the end result of the Epstein files. Is number one, you're going to see people go down, and it maybe not go down because an Epstein files release, but it's going to go down because there's criminal investigations, and they're taking this over to the UK. They're taking it over to Norway, who's taken down Jagland, which was their prime minister who just tried to commit suicide in jail, right? Like, this is what's happening behind the scenes. And so it's quite fascinating and interesting. And then also the one part that I love is Trump came out a week and a half ago and he said, the majority of Democrats are implicated by the Epstein files and their donors. But yet on the Epstein files, we haven't seen really any Democrats or their donors. So that what that tells me is we got it right here. We're just waiting to use it. And I think that that's pretty damn cool because what it is he flipped the script on them. He's using their compromise that they've held for years against them.
I remember when everybody was panicking, when Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, they're all putting this little pony show out there for everybody. Trump, oh, there's nothing to see. What are you talking about? Let's move on from the Epstein files, you guys. What are you talking? We got to build a country. And it was like, look, he's guilty. And then they go after it. Man, everybody bit down on that shit. And I was sitting there and I'm like, dude, you're all being played. Like, if you've ever played, like, I don't think enough people have been in fights. I don't think they've been in good strategic or chess or something. Like, you need to have that level of experience to understand what you're dealing with here, whether it's all what we all think it is or not. There's definitely some major strategic moves being made. And I agree, there's something going on behind all of this that really has felt, and Josh, we've spoken about this, so much of this has felt like we're getting the last bit of information. We're not informed up to speed of what's happening. There's what's happening, and then we're slowly being brought up to speed on it. So we're just catching up to things that have probably already been going down behind the scenes, because think of the nature of this. How would it have operated in New York when they had to take down the mafia and do the sting operations on the mafia? Like, what I don't know if people can even imagine the complexity of doing that. And that's just the Sicilian mafia in New York. I mean, not just, that's a major criminal, very embedded organization that had all kinds of dirty people in the government and the police, right? So you had to do this slowly, bit by bit. And a lot of people that you're doing, I've read even like books from some of the people that were involved in that, and they talk about how there's layers of information. And even when you're dealing with your colleagues, like there's a certain way you got to communicate because everybody's at different information levels, right? And you just imagine that's just New York with the mafia. And now magnify that times a million worldwide, deeply embedded in all of our institutions for like I've been tracking this slow march through the institutions. There's people that'll take this back a good 100 years, 200 years, right? In terms of the desire of some of these organizations, like going back to the Rhodes Scholars and all that, and then going back through the history of it, even going back to the 1700s, the founding of America, the founding of the Bavarian Illuminati, which was basically a criminal organization that was plotting the overthrow of the Bavarian government and also other governments, right? And there's even like a whole museum that you can go to read the documents of the Bavarian Illuminati. They went to court, they were tried, they were convicted, right? Like, and they found out that they were infiltrating political houses and luring royals and dukes and people of high estate to come into their thing. And then what are they doing? They're concocting these ideologies. You get into the Jacobins, Washington mentioned, you get into the French Revolution. Like I go back to studying a lot of this just from a research perspective, right? And you realize that when you're studying on the street level, how a gang, gains power and gets their drug trade going or whatever, and then all the way up to these traffickers or whatever. And then you go to the way that these guys move into the political world and basically seize your political institutions through infiltration, which JFK warned us about. It's the modus operandi of the CCP party, right? Like you infiltrate, you don't go direct combat for, blow for blow with the most powerful militaries in the world. If you want to take down Western civilization, like I make it like this for people that are just coming into it. When you understand the target is a world power structure, a super state world power system run by this tiny elite, as it's the ultimate goal. Well, you've got to get rid of anything that's in the way of that. And what's in the way of that is the Western civilization, because a lot of the others were already taken out throughout the way history went. And now we have places like America and the West that is like, no, we're about freedom and free speech and private property and free market and free trade. And like those policies violated what these guys dreamt up. So they had to, instead of going direct, they had to do an infiltration process. They had to capture the flag. And that's what we were told about in a lot of the Q posts. That's what we've been learning about in a lot of the other research. And then you find out that layer. That's why I keep bringing in the occult layer, that it's not just a money banking scam. It's not just some fraud with some Somalians. It's not just some money getting put into slush funds through Ukrainian donations and all this shit. It's worse. It's that you have basically people that have religious like zeal in their beliefs and their worldview, trying to create and recreate prophecies from within their worldview, like in their cult. This is a different level than I think we understand. And then when you get into some of the ritual components of it in these cults, and you wonder what levels some of these politicians and whatnot move in and out of those arenas. But I'm talking about the people behind that, the funders, the people that own the money, right? The people that are behind many of these institutions. So we're being shown pieces of this, and much of it feels like it's fresh to people. But I'm just saying this is a long war, and a lot, I think, has gone on before we've been brought up to speed on what we're getting now. So Epstein files, that's why we say it's a drop in the bucket. It's not that it's irrelevant. It's not that it's not important. It's very important. It's just that it's more about bringing everybody up to speed than it is about, well, here's all the damning information. The damning information is in sealed indictments and other places, I think.
I want to bring up an Axios memo that kind of supports this conversation that we've been having with regards to investigations going on. I did really got delivered some bad news I was not expecting right now. I'll share it at the end of the show. It's because it's probably going to impact a lot of people in the audience. that aren't aware of it just yet, with a friend of ours. But with this Axios memo, yeah, so forgive me if I'm distracted. I'm kind of digesting this as we carry on. When this memo came out last year in 2025, myself and Josh had already kind of been communicating to people that, listen, there is a investigation going on. There's RICO cases that are going on. People are like, no, no, no. When this memo got leaked and Axios reported, this definitely confirmed, my speculation based off of, like I said, the totality of circumstantial stuff that I was looking at. Now, when this came out, everybody was focusing on this highlighted part. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. So when this came out, everybody's like, see, that's it. They didn't find no evidence. The case is closed. They're not investigating. What people failed to realize was how this paragraph started out. And it was this sentence. This systemic review revealed no incriminating client list. Now, the reason this is so important is when you go to the second page. This was the other thing that had everybody up in arms. And this is the paragraph where Bongino and Kash Patel say, FBI investigators concluded that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell at a Metropolitan, after a thorough investigation, the important part of this sentence. And why is this important? Because what this is telling you, the other thing that was very weird about this as well is you had a DOJ logo and the FBI logo. And speaking to some of the FBI whistleblowers and people like that, that's not common. It's happened before, but it's not common. And there's no date and there's no signature here. So more than likely, this is a draft, memo that was leaked. I think it was purposely leaked. And I think it was for those of us that had this background, they knew we would catch this. When they say here, on this part here, after an investigation, and when they say here, after a systemic review, what they're communicating to us is that the author or authors understand the distinction between a systemic review and an investigation. Now, me and Josh have talked about this before. I don't think we've ever brought up the memo for people to actually see it. Is if I'm the case agent and the DOJ or Pam Bondi's coming up to me and saying, hey, we're going to do the Epstein investigation now. Well, if you do it as a supplemental report, because remember the FBI, because remember everybody went crazy when Trump said the FBI and the Democratic investigation's a hoax, and everybody's like, oh my God, he's saying that Epstein's a hoax, and he wasn't. He was saying that investigation was a hoax because he understood what I'm about to kind of explain. Is if they came up to me as a special agent and say, hey, we got to do this Epstein investigation, well, I'm not going to do it as a supplemental report, because if I'm going to do a thorough, honest a police investigation, and then we're going to go get a jury or a grand jury, we don't only get to submit my report because it's a supplemental. You have to submit the entire investigation as a whole. Now, if we know this investigation is riddled with fraud, perjury, destruction of evidence, you name the bad thing and it's there, well, it doesn't matter how thorough and perfect and honest my supplemental investigation is. All a good defense attorney has to do is weigh in on, look at, there was fraud here and cover up here and destruction here. And now that jury has to see that, and they would come to the conclusion of reasonable doubt. And these people walk. So what they're saying here in this sentence, a systemic review, is what I would do is I'd be like, okay, Pam Bondi or president, whoever tasked me with it, I'll go do a systemic review of the existing investigation. I'll salvage any evidence that hasn't been compromised too much or that we can't fix. And I'll look into new crimes that need to be investigated as far as the cover up, but I'll be doing a new investigation. And when I saw this, I was just like, a systemic review means that they have another RICO case. They have another investigation that's going on right now. Yep. So then to the second part here, when people lost their mind, well, they're saying on this part, after an investigation, Epstein killed himself. You got to remember, Bongino and Kash they're no longer operating as podcasters and pundits. These are governments working in an official capacity. They don't get to provide opinion in a memo or to the public. They have to report on the facts that they have. And so if we know, and this goes into 18 USC 3521 WHITSAC, if we know that the evidence that's being presented to them shows an autopsy report, shows certain photos, and shows certain things, they can only report on what they're reading. And that's why this investigation would lead to that conclusion. But it doesn't mean that there's other things that are at play. But this memo in itself, people got so pushed because of the way propaganda works. People got so, caught up in that everybody missed the most powerful sentence right there, which was a systemic review. This right here was far more important than people realized. And so, to the conversation we're having of these investigations that are unfolding, this memo itself was evidence that is absolutely taking place right now behind the scenes.
Wow, that's incredible. I needed that explanation. That's amazing. Because people have thrown that at me and I was like, yeah, I don't know. I know there's deeper. I just know people don't know what they're reading and they think they do. And so I'm like, guys, like we do need some professionals to weigh in on what's being said in some of these memos and stuff.
So maybe a deviation a little bit. This is something that I noticed, and I'm curious if you guys noticed it as well. Donald Trump, JD Vance, even Elon have all been talking about the last 6 months, the bringing back of mental institutions and insane asylums. Now, I find this really interesting because I'm like, what happened to insane asylums? Well, after like 1930, they begin to taper off and kind of go away. And at the end of the 19th century, they started to kind of ramp up and be built out. And then they kind of went like this and went away. And I said, well, why did they come about in the first place? What happened to produce this mental illness in society where you needed all these insane asylums, and then it kind of went away? Well, sure enough, that insane asylums became very, very popular right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And then as the Industrial Revolution began to taper off and various different laws started getting in place on workers' rights and 40-hour work weeks, it begins to taper off. And I said, I wonder if there's a psychological transition that occurs within human beings, within society and culture itself, when you go through a massive transition of society and culture, like a technological revolution, like the advent of artificial superintelligence that's going to bring about a 500-year leap of technology, and people are going to transition away from the 40-hour work week and through the labor force, and that's all going to go away in the next 20 years. If that's going to produce massive bouts of mental illness, and that's why they're actually calling for the return of insane asylums and mental institutions. What are your thoughts?
I've never heard it like that. That's interesting. You got me interested in that. I was thinking maybe just because just look at what's walking around in the streets these days. Like they've made everybody go crazy. Like they need to repair the damage now. Like everybody went nuts with the psychological war. So maybe part of me was thinking, this is how that's done. The other thing too, you could maybe bring in, some people might bring in the fact that in the way that politics has moved into more of the woke categories, we'll call it woke, as this infiltration into the institutional level has happened in the academics and whatever, is this soft on crime. The criminal is not guilty. They were abused. So we got to have more therapy and sit them on a couch. And, this softening up process took place as everything got really highly feminized in society. Right. And so then when that happens is that view, the left looked at the insane asylums as being this horrible remnant of just like, punishment, and it's the right wing. It's too, masculine, just disciplining and they looked at it as an evil place. Right. And, so they stopped funding it. The other thing is it's like, why were they letting in these criminal illegals into the country? Well, because they're going to cause chaos, right? And there's all kinds of incentives involved with this stuff. And so you go, well, why would they do that? Well, why would they let some of the crazy people out of the insane asylums to be running around in the streets, right? Unleash what does Albert Pike say? Unleash the vagrants, unleash the, the crazies, basically. And so Joker and Penguin and all of them are all running around in the streets and crime and violence. Like we got it here. Like the mental health level is insane. The drug. Also, don't forget, we have to recover from the fentanyl war, the drug war. which has
Right.
driven people mad. What about the jibber jabs? What kind of toll has that taken psychologically? What about just the lockdown era, raising kids in a basic giant world of an incubator? Like, how do you, there's a recovery process. So I guess I'm throwing reasons. My mind's just thinking of reasons why there
And
might
I
be
was
like,
doing the same thing.
right.
But
And we
now they
just,
got me interested where I wanted to go back and start to look at historical trends, like
yeah,
during the
that
time
is
we're coming out of the
fascinating.
Dark Ages and the Renaissance, and see if there was an uptick in mental illness because of the. And I look at it as the extreme transition of society and a culture in a very, very short period of time that also brings about evolution. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, spiritual and physical evolution. So I'm curious to like research that more, but it's a theory that I have. And I'm like, I wonder. I don't know. I just got this inclination that it kind of reminds me of the Electric Rainbow, the book, The Electric Rainbow, of how, you know, once we got introduced into electromagnetic waves, people started getting sick and started going crazy and started having psychological effects because of it. And so now we're and by the way, here's another key point to this is that Trump just put out an executive order establishing 6G dominance, a whole new electromagnetic spectrum that is going to increase data bandwidth rates up to a terabyte. So there we go. We're moving from 5G to 6G over the course of the next 5 to 10 years as well. So it could be because of that as well.
Yeah. The technology, the impact of technology, right?
Yep.
And
Well, that raises the question to me to bring it back to that soundbite from Hillary Clinton, Josh. She brought up not just Pizzagate, but she also brought up UFOs. Like
She
there's
did.
an interesting selection of things she chose to highlight.
Also, there's in the UFO world, because the interesting thing that I found, Josh, do you remember when like the UFO world would not talk to the Pizzagate world or the Q
Oh, yeah.
world? Like, because they were like, no, John Podesta is going to disclose the aliens. He's one of the good guys. And we're like, no, he's a satanic pedophile. And there was a big debate. And we're like, well, they're like, well, even if he is, we still need to know the truth about the aliens. And I'm like, well, maybe those two subjects are connected. Like, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, that's a big one. That's a very controversial one, I know. But it's just, the thing is Hillary Clinton was also part of the discussion in the UFO groups. They were always like, look, she's got this book. It's like a UFO book, and she's talking about UFOs. And like both the left and the right have had little whispers about UFOs and disclosing it. There was all Bill Clinton saying, yeah, I did ask about it, but it turns out there's no aliens, you know, and Obama, he's like, yeah, I really did ask, I promise. And they didn't say they found anything. And like, they've always brought it up. And I always thought very quickly with that subject, and who just said it? Somebody just said it. And I went, oh my God, I'm not the only one that thinks this. It'll come to me. But it's this theory that about the disclosure thing. If we are, let's just say we have to go along with the idea that we are talking about non-human advanced civilizations interacting with Earth. I know there's a variety of ways people can explain that in their heads of what that is, but let's just say, okay, we go with our experience as humans. Here we are living in physical and spiritual consciousness, and we live on a planet and we see that there's other planets. And so we just deduce that we're probably not the only ones. Okay, let's just go with that. Well, now that opens up a whole other thing, because remember on Earth where we didn't understand there were other peoples and tribes that we had no idea, there was that time of exploration, right? Well, we're about to embark on that in the space age, or at least we've all been hoping we could finally get there. And we're wondering why we weren't there already, at least in the public domain. And so you think, all right, well, if we're interacting with something, who really holds the card? Let's say we're interacting with something more advanced than us. Okay. We're interacting with something more advanced than us, whatever it is, interdimensional, spiritual, I don't care. Who holds the cards with disclosure? Is it the government of humans, human government that can't even balance the budget or whatever? Or is it whatever's more advanced than us that has the final say on what's going on with disclosure of their presence, or what the business they have doing here, or the fact that maybe this whole place is theirs? Like, I don't know. Maybe we're the aliens. There's a lot of theories, but I think that it's interesting to think about it like that. And I posed this question to Stanton Friedman before he passed away. I posed this to Stephen Bassett. I posed it to Richard Dolan. I posed it to Jim Mars. I posed it to Michael. I posed it to a lot of people in the UFO field. And for some reason, they all kind of look down at their nose, but no. The government wants, there's factions of the government that doesn't want to expose it. That's why it's classified as they don't think humanity can handle it. And I'm like, I'm sure those factions exist, but like, it's kind of like, I hate to bring it up, it's kind of like Canada right now, believing that it has a chance in a trade war against the United States by pulling all the booze off the shelves because of TDS, and not understanding that we should probably be working with America and not like demonizing them and then going to run for safety to China. Like that's not recommended. Right. But we think there's an arrogance factor amongst the the Canadian population. Not everybody, by the way, I want to make that clear. There's a whole faction of millions of Canadians that don't agree with this shit. But just the mainstream, they're propagandized, and they have this weird feeling like we can somehow win a trade war and that we're doing elbows up tactics, and that's going to help us. And if we could win a hockey game, then that means politically we're winning. And that's not even working out, sadly. So it's just like that level of delusion is where people are at with this subject. Is they're like, we believe, first of all, the arrogant belief in science that, well, the laws of physics determine that there's no way that anybody could even get close to here. It's just impossible. And I'm like, oh, right, because humans invented physics. I forgot. And humans know everything about the mysteries of the universe, right? Like we figured it all out, right? And it's like, what level of arrogance you got to have when we have the evidence that something's here that's not even remotely close to the technology that we have allegedly, right? So you bring it all together and you think, well, it's not us that would be in control of whether we get to know about this. It's them that would be in control of whether we get to know about this. If they have the massive leg up in advanced technology, advanced knowledge of the nature of reality, advanced knowledge of how the universe works. We're talking about far older civilizations, far more developed, right? Like just like on Earth, there are civilizations that are more developed than other civilizations. It makes sense. That carries on throughout the universe. And so I guess I found it really shocking that the top UFO guys all turned me down on that. And I'm like, it kind of seems like the most obvious explanation. And then somebody just did a show, a big podcast. Oh, Peter Levenda. Do you remember Peter Levenda, Josh? He was big back in like, I'd say early to mid 2000s. He was on Red Ice and all those, and like,
gotcha.
Coast to Coast. He wrote a book. He's like more of an academic level UFO guy. Like he's a very smart guy. He wrote all kinds of stuff on World War II. And then, but he went on this podcast recently. I didn't even know he was still doing work. I was thrilled to see that he was, because he was a sharp man. And he came out and said this theory. He's like, why is everybody thinking that the government gets to decide when they disclose? He's like, it's whatever they are get to decide when humanity gets to know. And so I'm like, if they're pushing disclosure, is it us pushing disclosure? Is it us pushing any of this? It's just a question.
Is it us pushing disclosure to force their hand? Or is it something that was negotiated between them? Or is it that we know that there's something that's about to happen within the course of humanity that's going to prompt a first contact type of scenario, like artificial superintelligence?
Yeah, it could be like, maybe there's trigger points in a civilization that it's like, okay, you guys grew up, you're at purple belt now, good for you. High five, ready to join the big boy table now. And then we get to the next level and like, okay, now we're going to open it up. You can get part of the whole, I don't know, like you start to wonder, like maybe, because even think about the secret societies, about why they existed. Okay. And I always tell this to people. Secret societies existed for two reasons, not just one. It wasn't just all evil. Secrecy is not just, things aren't held secret from humanity only for evil reasons. Okay. Sometimes it's about whether people are ready. I've experienced this directly with having information ahead of time. And you guys have seen this too. You've had information ahead of time because you've done your research, right? On the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or the World Economic Forum. And you're like, guys, I'm warning you about who you're listening to right now. Here's some information about why you should probably not just trust what they're saying to you. And people would say, no, you're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. Because they weren't ready to hear it. And we couldn't get access to whatever level of smoking gun would satisfy all these people that are just saying you're crazy. Nothing would convince them. You could put heaps of information on and they just wouldn't look at it. Mm-hmm. Well, that's just with who runs the banking cartels and who runs pharma. What about who runs the neighborhood we happen to inhabit as a planetary system? Like, are you ready for that? Do you really want to know? Because when I talk about this subject, I get hate from everybody. I get hate from the religious crowd that tries to turn it all into angels and demons and fairy tales. And not to say that doesn't exist too. I'm just saying it's kind of like, I hate how it's a 2D, like it's only that. Like, and then the other side that's like, no, you're reading into it too much. It's all conspiracy theory, and you watch too much X-Files growing up, and all this stuff is just AI videos and fake Russian and disinformation or something. So you got these extremes. No matter what you say, you can't even really bring out the subject. So that's where it's been locked. But what happens if now here we are, they're talking about disclose, like more of this is coming, more in the movies, more in this, and everybody thinks it's Project Bluebeam or something, right?
Right.
And maybe there's an element of this, but well, it's like the boy who cried wolf too many times. I know nobody wants to trust the government right now. Nobody wants to trust that this information could come out. But what if you think about the theory that I just said? It's not the government in control anyways. If you're finding out about it, you're finding out about it because whatever that is like, yeah, we're going to slowly bring you up to speed. We have a bigger plan for this planet. And so you're going to be brought up to speed technologically. You're going to be brought up to speed about everything, your history. You're going to be brought up to speed about who the hell we are and why we've been here your entire existence. And when you're ready, you'll know. And I don't know. I guess I think about that sometimes, that people feel like we have more control over that than we really do. And people also believe that we know a lot about it, that we know, and everybody speaks so affirmatively about what it is. And I'm like, we don't know shit. We know enough to know that there's something going on that's massive, but trust me, you know nothing. Like it's that big. That's just my feeling.
You know, to that point, and regardless to what people subscribe to, whether we control the disclosure or whether they control the disclosure, the other side of that problem is the deployment of that disclosure. You know, in this conversation, we talked about MK Ultra, and you know, back in the days, what they do, they're putting, opening eyes and putting, a bunch of subliminal messages and frequencies and noise. And through the evolution of that, they were like, hey, there's ways we can do this with frequencies on their phones, and people could be MK Ultra, right through their social media, right through their TVs. Like we've been the modern day MK Ultra, for people that are not aware of, it's been happening since we go into preschool, kindergarten cartoons. And so if we talk about, if somebody's addicted to drugs, you don't just strip them right off the drugs. The body will go into withdrawals that can harm the person or even kill them, depending what level it is. If somebody is in a mental health institution, you don't just say, hey, they feel better now, let's just cut their meds and put them out into the public. It's too dangerous. And so if we look at ourselves as, okay, we recognize that we've been programmed for decades, maybe since birth, then that means we have also become dependent on this programming that exists. And so if you just pull the plug and say, here's the truth, you run the risk of people being injured or, even fatal. And so we can look at things that are like a lot more simpler to understand. In elementary school, what do the kids all test for? Fire drills and earthquake drills. It's training for, a massive event that's going to create fear and paranoia and injuries. So at a young age, we train, hey, you get under your desk, teacher pulls a fire alarm, teacher says it's okay. Then there's a systematic approach to where we go to the safest place in the fields. We do a roll call, make sure everybody's there. There's a plan of how to work through the chaos. Now, as kids, we may not understand that. We're like, oh, it's time to go into the desk, and then we're going to end up in the field. We'll joke around. We'll get in a line. They'll make sure we're all here and we'll go back to it. Well, that concept still applies to society. And I think this is what that slow disclosure is. It's slowly bringing humanity up to the point where not everybody, but enough of people are going to understand that other people that maybe would have rejected it are going to look at, well, a lot of people are believing this. Maybe it's real. You definitely minimize the potential for people to go into isolation because it's going to be happening on such a massive front. And I think that's what we're seeing, regardless, because I
got one more theory.
Fire off, man.
What if it was one big psychological operation to check the heartbeat of America, of the world, as the preparations were being made for the release of the information? What if the determination of what to actually release is being decided right now by watching X and podcasts and listening to what people are saying and how much fear versus propaganda versus bullshit versus truth is being put out there? As in, if there's still this long lingering fear of, oh, they're demons and they're evil and they're going to kill us and all of this, then they're going to be like, hey, guys, this is going to have profound impacts on religion and society. We can't release this information. So let's just throw out some videos and say there's some anomalous things in the sky. But if people are like, hey, look, nobody cared. Like, nobody gave a shit, right? It looks like America looks like they're like, cool either way, man. It's all right. Then let's throw it all out there. Let's just give it all out there. And it was, I think it was Ratcliffe that came out there, the CIA director. He said, look, we're releasing certain documents right now, not because we have to, but because we are an apologetic administration. We are releasing things that are going to hurt society. Society's going to look at them and they're going to look at us and go, why did you do that? Understand it wasn't us, but we are apologizing for the harms that we did in the past. And now when you start to bring that into context, I look at this as kind of like, the reason they didn't release them on the day they said they're going to release them is not because they have to get reviewed. They've already been fucking reviewed. December 2020, Trump gave all of the agencies 180 days to compile all the evidence, all the information, and get it to Congress. It took them 2 years just to have a hearing on it, and the agencies never handed that information over. You know, Trump has been doing that since the day he came in, because I've been talking about it, trickle-down disclosure. You had Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, on Fox News on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, and Dan Driscoll sitting there and he's talking, he goes, this is such a miraculous time for the U.S. Army. I just talked to an astronaut who's a soldier who's on the moon. What?
Yeah.
That's trickle-down disclosure, right? That's prepping the narrative for what's to come. And, you know, I had a conversation the other day at my show talking about the 500-year leap. We're about to make a 500-year leap technologically in 20 years. And I had someone call me up that this man is incredibly well respected, very high up there. And he goes, you're right. You're spot on. We are about to make a 500-year leap technologically in society in less than 20 years. Buckle up. So, like, I think what it is they are testing the waters before they put information out. And a lot of the psychological warfare behind the Epstein files was the same thing. You know, you get the social media guys that come out there that never even heard of Epstein before, all holding their Epstein binders and like, look at us. And then you see the outrage from the people. Well, that set the narrative for what happened next. And that was Elon Musk, Donald Trump's in the Epstein files. Then Pam Bondi going, I just watched something disgusting, to a week later, oh, there's nothing in there. There's nothing in those files.
Well,
and then Donald Trump, Donald, go ahead.
Part of that psychological operation, like what you're talking about with Bindergate and all that stuff, is you can't break people from the matrix. The people are going to think I'm crazy for this, but I'm telling you, my opinion, but I think I'm right on this. You can't break people from the matrix by only telling them the truth.
Oh, truth.
Yeah.
You have to shatter people's trust in their own belief systems.
Boom.
Because that's what opens them up to accept the revelations of new information. So when you have things like Bindergate, people are like, why did this happen? Because all these people latched onto it because they've been following these people for years. They've said things that resonate with them. They trust them. They understand them. And then it's like, when these people blatantly come out, it's like, well, like, damn, they're lying to us. That's shattering to someone, because you're cutting the umbilical cord. They don't want to let go of that dependency. Some will even claim they don't have dependency, but they do. And what this is doing, it's shattering that. It's shattering people's belief systems, because that has to happen to break people. You have to have, just as much as you need truth, you have to shatter the reality that already exists. And you cannot shatter a reality with just truth.
Man, that's really well said, man. And both of you, man, you got my mind going. And one thing that was coming to me when you were talking, Josh, is screen tests for movies.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do with movies? They did them with like all the big films like Jurassic Park. They do screen tests before they release them, and then they will change the movie if they feel like the audience didn't react. They measure the reaction of the audience, right? And then you think, okay, well, Trump is involved in this too. And where did he come from? He came from working in Hollywood with TV. He understands how optics work. And the military understands this because they've had to do this kind of stuff in other countries when it comes to optics and priming populations for changes in regime and changes in this and that. Like there's a whole art form to this. Everybody's been raised in the West to consider that always to be something only negative. Like a psyop is only negative. We've talked about this. But if you've had an entire multi-generational psyoping MK Ultra program going on the media, Mockingbird Media, raising your grandparents and your parents, and then you and Disney and the whole thing, you've had that since cradle to grave. How do you don't just drop the truth? Like you were saying, you can't just drop the truth on them. You have to untangle the propaganda. That's why all these street interviews with these radical, crazy, like woke people or whatever, that are just spouting a bunch of insanity as if it's real. And people are trying to debate with them. And you can't even have a debate or a proper argument, because the psychology isn't present for that to happen. If you drop hardcore real truth on the human psyche, they've done this, they know this, it will fracture, because they know the other piece of the puzzle is that they know the human psyche is already highly traumatized from all of the race memory and the historical memory of traumas that even our ancestors went through. And they know that piled on top of that is probably whatever you've gone through in your own personal life. On top of that is all the propaganda. So you don't just drop raw truth on people. It will literally make the place explode. And I think I struggled with this because especially when I was younger, and I was like, no, just the truth. Everybody needs to know the truth. And they go, yeah, but what if they kill you for the truth? What if they tear the place apart and burn it down because the truth came out? Right? Like, I think that's one of the reasons. This is my theory. Okay. Because I'm open-minded to all the explanations with the UFO phenomena. Okay. I think we're dealing with a mystery. So have at it, speculate. But I've done a lot of stuff into the psychology because of the research in cults, because I was curious about what psychologically primed the leaders of these cults. Like what made a John of God psychologically, what made the followers, like what made everybody such rabid followers, what made everybody just cry and love and bleed for Mao Zedong and Stalin and all these dictators. What's the psychology behind it? And I learned this by working with Michael Tsarian, who was like the only guy in the conspiracy research movement that brought the subject up and said, hey, everybody's missing the chapters on human psychology. They understand psychological warfare to a certain degree. They understand that there's like mind control but they don't understand what psychology is. So sitting on top of the human psyche is already kind of shattered, right? So they know that if they drop full truth, you'll reject it. And here's what I am saying. I sometimes test my theories out based on the reactions I get from them, because I want to see, like, okay, are there legitimate people that are very interested, that are just bringing me some good evidence and good arguments, and they're logical, they're reasonable. I'm down for that because I don't know if I'm right. But if I get antagonistic and this and that, you can tell by the reactions if you're dealing with psychology. I'm sure you know when I'm talking about Alpha with all the interviews you've done, right? And so when we talk about the subject of non-human intelligence, that's a big term, non-human intelligence. That could be AI, clones, artificially created organisms. That could be non-human, non-terrestrial, other dimensional, spiritual. There's a lot. When you say non-human intelligence, that could bring up a lot of things. My theory is the reason why people try to make it as not as real world as possible, and they try to make this only other dimensions. It's out of our reality. It's out in spiritual world, right? I think we could bring in the psychology to explain that phenomena. And the reason I bring in the psychology is because of the level of vitriol that I get when I try to get people a little more grounded on this subject and say, I find it funny that of all the theories about UFOs, the most obvious one is the most hated and reviled by everybody. And it's the one that's the most simple, which is that they're very much like you and I. Remember Phil Schneider that came out back in the day?
Mm-hmm.
He talked about these beings that the government knew about, going back to the, like, what did he say? They had excavators going into some of these cave systems. This was his testimony, that go back to the era of the Civil War in America and then all the way through, right? And so they've known about whatever these are. And he called them, these are creatures that are flesh and blood, mortal creatures, just like you and I. They can be killed, right? That was what he said. A lot of people didn't like that part of Phil Schneider's talk, and they don't post that part. They only post the adrenochrome stuff he talked about and the fact that there's these beings, but they don't like talking about that physical side he was bringing up. There's a few others that brought this up as well, that, you know, at least there's a side to them that is just as mortal as we are, right? Whatever this phenomena is. Then you get into all the cryptids and all these creatures and everything. And I just find it fascinating to me that the moment I say, okay, maybe we're dealing with, everybody thinks it's spiritual because they can disappear and in and out and blink on and off, and it's other dimensional. But like a lot of people, when you pin them down, it's hard to get an explanation on it, on what they mean when they say that. And I just go, well, what if we're talking about just something we don't understand because it has the ability to do things that we don't, and maybe even our perception is limited. Maybe it's not different realities. Maybe it's one reality that we just aren't fully having access to, right? And maybe there's an element to them that is physical and spiritual, just like, and multidimensional, just like there is with us, right? So I guess I'm wondering why everybody gravitates instantly to spiritual beings or interdimensional beings and runs the hell away from anything that gets a little more real. And I'll finish with this. Do you remember that scene in the movie Signs with Mel Gibson with the crop circles or whatever? And there's I was in the theater when that movie came out, and I will never forget the gasp that I heard from the audience when that one alien scene, when he's walking across at that birthday party or whatever, and Joaquin Phoenix is like, "Vamonos, go on, get the kids out of the way," and then the creature walks by the camera. We all came out of our bodies in terror in that scene of that film. And the reason why is because it wasn't some translucent ghost-like being that was just floating around the room. It was as real as a fucking crocodile walking past you. It was in the real world, interacting with the real world. It was seen by multiple witnesses. That scene terrifies the audiences all over because of that. Those are tests. Those films, like you're talking about, Josh, they're also going to prep the explanation they're going to give based on your psychology, not necessarily based on the full truth of it. So that's how I see it.
You know, real quick on that, Josh, when as I was listening to you guys talk about it, you know, I got my little girl a new tablet, so, you know, so she can watch her little princess movies, right? But she likes to do her own little videos, right? Future podcaster. And so she goes through the memory cards like crazy. So when I ordered it, I made sure to, you know, order little 1 terabyte memory cards. So this way it'll at least be a couple months before she's like, Dad, I can't save anything anymore, right? But as I go and I install it, you know, I open it, it's brand new, I put it in there, and it says you have to reformat it first before it can receive information. And so I'm listening to this conversation to you guys, and I'm looking at, you know, the human mindset. How would that apply to the human mindset? You know, you got to reformat it in order for it to be able to take in this information. And a real life thing that I've experienced, every military person in here has experienced it that went to boot camp. Doesn't matter what branch you went to, you know, but in the Marine Corps, you go to boot camp. You're in boot camp for, you know, 3.5 months, and you get all these people, different cultures, different backgrounds, different sizes, different levels of health. Everyone's different, but they all have to be uniformed on that graduation day. And we're talking a very small window, 3.5 months. And if you look at the you know, the psychological process of it, they immediately start breaking you down. They start shredding you of your identity of yourself as you've known it. Don't matter what your hairstyle was, everybody's getting their head shaved. Doesn't matter what your style of clothes was, everybody's getting green sweats and a green t-shirt. Doesn't matter what you thought your name is, you answered to the name recruit. everybody became, a template. We all became cookie cutters. And then through the evolution of this process, after they completely broke you down, I mean, you remember, Josh, you maggots, they're scum, and that's here, and you guys are down here. But by the time you get to graduation, you earned being able to iron your clothes. You earned being able to, now you get to wear the EGA. Now you get to cuff and blouse your trousers. Now you get to fold your collar. As you grow, you start looking more and more of what you saw on the TV commercials and the recruiting posters. And all of a sudden, in 3.5 months, what do all the families say about their loved ones, whether it's their kids, their brothers, their sisters, their husbands, their wives? They're like, man, it was like a completely different person. But it's the same person. It's just they got reformatted.
Reformatted, yeah.
And built a different way. Well, how do you do that to the entire human population that probably aren't going to be consenting to it? You still have to figure a way to do it. And I would ask, what do you two gentlemen with your research, and as long as you guys have been in it, how do you accomplish that? You have to get it done, and people are going to reject it, and they're not going to consent to it. So you got to do it in a way where you're not telling them, is what I would suspect.
Yeah, you got to use psychological operations.
Well, number one is you have to create a psychological operation that is going to create and generate a movement that takes back the idea of information and then begins the process of building that movement up to the point where it overcomes and drowns out the mainstream media, which had been hijacked. That was called Q. And then from there, you can work with that realm of information. You can throw tests out there. You can do various different psyops. Like I called my last show of 2025 the 2025 psyop, because that's what it was. 2025 was the Trump administration coming in, everybody thinking, oh my God, they're going to kick ass. And it was like, what just happened? Because the majority of MAGA and America First truthers were like, arrest accountability. But that's not what he did. He dismantled the Belt and Roads Initiative of China. He dismantled the New World Order and the rules-based international community. He defunded USAID and massive amounts of money laundering, right? He went after the global infrastructure. It was complete misdirection when everybody thought he was going to be doing things here and that investigations were going to happen. Nope. He took down these guys. Why? Yep. Because the deep state was replaceable. These guys, this is what controls it all. He took out the infrastructure that controls it, and then he's going to go after the deep state. But this was misdirection on a global scale. He used the information domain to propagate bullshit, disinformation. Why? Disinformation is necessary. And this is what Alpha was saying. This is how you shatter that reality. You don't do it through truth. You do it through controlled releases of information, whether they're truthful or not. Hints and signals that, hey, this is coming. That's the Q world, right? And then guess what happens? Well, nothing happens. Well, people are still hopeful. People still have high morale. And then nothing happens. And all of a sudden, boom, it happens. And it's like, I told you, oh my God. And then everybody else jumps back in. And this is how they bring you along this ride of massive disclosure on a large scale. Because number one, I'll say this before on the show. In 2019, nobody in the fucking world knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. So if you took down Jeffrey Epstein and his network in 2019, it wouldn't have mattered. But after Donald Trump, Elon Musk comes out and says, Donald Trump's in the Epstein files. Then Donald Trump's like, let's just forget about Epstein. There's no reason to talk about him. We don't need to do that. And every single Democrat and leftist donors started jumping into it because they knew they destroyed the files about them. They're like, no, release the files. You get a bipartisan bill. 99% of Congress and Senate approve its passage, and he signs it. Why? Because it was a psyop. Because by that time, the left, the right, the moderates, the independents, every household name knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. And that made the files way more significant when they started to come out. It's the same thing that's happening right now with the UFO files.
You know what you made me think of right now when you were explaining that, Josh? And I was just like, I can't believe it didn't click. It didn't click until you were explaining all that. The other component to that success that happens in boot camp, and I don't know if this is the appropriate term, but it was collective trauma. Mm-hmm. You weren't experiencing that by yourself. your entire platoon was going through that together, the sleep deprivation together, the, deprived of food together, the dehydration together, physical punishment together. Everything was a collective trauma, because I would imagine that if it was individualized, the vast majority would probably fail out. But the fact that you were going through this with other people, it creates unity, right?
Mhm.
One of the major components to the success of that was that collective trauma.
Yep.
And think about what we've gone through as a world, like collective trauma on steroids, right? And it's also traumatizing. You see all the videos of these young kids finding out about the Epstein files all over TikTok and everything, and they're all just crying and freaking out, and people running around airports are like, "Why aren't you guys waking up to the Epstein files?" Like, because we're like, yeah, and we all remember. We're like, "Oh man, I remember being there." And you're probably like, when you're I remember being the new recruit on the first week and being like, "What the hell is this?" But then you look back, like it's like Charlie Sheen in Platoon. When he first goes in, he's green, he's new, and he's terrified, and everything is making him jump. And then he's been on a few tours, and in the end, he's the guy that's been sitting there smoking the cigarette, just like no big deal, right? And he sees the new recruits coming in, and he remembers he was there. That's how a lot of us feel. And but I think it's made it easier. And even the questioning everybody's had to do. There's a lot of talk about a psychological operation that makes you do a psychological operation on yourself and like analyze what you think you know. I come from a world where that's healthy. I don't come from a world where that's Operation Trust and it's a psyop to try to demoralize you. I come from a world where, getting broken down to a certain extent is part of growing new muscles and new skills. And like in jiu-jitsu, you don't build skill by just practicing moves and memorizing repeating moves. You learn skill by getting the shit crushed out of you over and over again and having no response for it and feeling completely helpless, and then having those dark nights of the soul and staying up thinking about what you did wrong with this person that you outweigh by like 60 pounds and you're stronger than them, and they're still just destroying you and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's like, why is this happening? And then the more you stay and the more you show up and you survive injuries and you survive bruises and getting beaten up, and suddenly you're just like you said, you're a different person now. You can take more, you're stronger, you're more resilient. And then you're skilled on top of that. And now you're the one doing the crushing. You're the hammer now, right? And that took time. And it wasn't that you memorized moves. It's not like Mortal Kombat combos. It's just understanding how to survive, because you've been there so many times. You're tempered steel now, right? Well, many of us in this is a war, right? Psychologically, you've been going through that. I've been going through it. You've all been going through it. And some people didn't survive it. Some people rang the bell and quit and said, fuck, I'm tapping out. And they either left, they went black pilled, they went crazy. I've seen friends go literally crazy town because just psychologically something broke them along the way. And it's so sad, right? Others were able to get through it. So we're in this environment where, and I feel like everybody's gonna have to decide for themselves who they think the good guys and the bad guys are. But I always just go back to, what's your experience right now? What was your experience during the last 10 years, 6 years, 3 years, however long it's been in this? And what have you learned about yourself along the way? What have you learned about the world that you live in? What have you learned about talents and strengths you didn't know you had until this level of pressure was put on you, until this precipice was brought to you? What did you find out about yourself? That's what kept me going through the dark nights was, yes, this is scary. Yes, this is horrible. I'm living in Canada, guys, watching my country burn itself to the ground, metaphysically speaking, and maybe even really when we think of all the forest fires, we're getting lit everywhere. But anyways, watching the country implode, watching people willingly go into mass formation psychosis, yet again, and refuse to understand what to do to save the country. And watch the economy change, watch everything happen, and not be able to change anything about it. Like, we try what you can, but not being able to really change it. So I go back, well, what did I learn from it? What did I get out of it? How have I grown from it? Right. And then everybody has to figure out where they're going from there. But anyways.
Yeah, to the question you presented, David, what has the experience been like? Again, I consider myself still in the infancy stage of everything that's going on. But when I go back to, like I said, Epstein's suicide's what got my attention, but it was much, much later, I would say late 2020, that I really started to put the picture together of not knowing who they were, but just understanding the level of sophistication that this network of evil was operating at. And it was at that point that I actually, like you said, that you do these, psychological operations on yourself and these, self evaluations. This was one of the times where I didn't have the research you guys had into this, so I could only judge, my experience of what I was going through the knowledge I had, which was strategic planning, operational planning. And when we look at, if we're going to go into a battle, if I'm going to create an operation for my guys, what's the likelihood of a mission success? So this is how I presented this question to myself of what I saw starting to happen. And I broke it down to those two things of why the bad guys were putting us through whatever it was that we were going through, right? Whatever and we can all define it in so many different ways. But I said, why are they going about it this way? And this is what I was able to convince myself of through, my experiences and my training. One, they don't have the numbers to physically take us on in a kinetic way, and this is in the absence of like higher technology, right? This, human v human type stuff. So they didn't see that as an option because the accepted casualties for them was a number too great. So that automatically became, okay, that's not going to be a plan for them. Maybe a contingency, but that's not going to be a plan for them. Or the second thing is, if they do have the numbers and they do have the technology and they do have the means to take it physically, then what are they afraid of being destroyed in the process that they won't risk doing it that way? Which means, what is it that we have that a major conflict, is not worth it to them because something could get destroyed in the process, whether it be the planet, I don't know the answer to it. These were just things that I told myself, we need to focus on these things because this is in there means that there's an Achilles heel. If there's something that they figure is a risk assessment to them, or if there's something that they don't want to see damage, we just got to figure out what that is.
So this is great. I'm glad you brought this part up. And David, I'll let you respond here in a second, but I wanted to get this out because this was what I was going to say earlier on the UFO topic. Because I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here, we're not just talking about the global elite. We're talking about whatever this is above it. And here's the paradigm that I think that also needs to shift. One of the things that we hear in the UFO community is that we shoot these things down, that these things are crashing. Well, why are they crashing? How are they coming down? You heard Roswell, it was the radar, electromagnetic waves, right? So the big misconception is that all of these things are more technologically and spiritually advanced than us. That's just not true. What if they just grew up in a different environment to where gravity was the predominant force and they learned how to manipulate that and maybe know nothing about electromagnetism? And they have complete gravitational technology and know nothing about electromagnetism. So they come to our planet and then all of a sudden, boom, they get hit with a radar and they crash. It doesn't, just because they have technology that is different and moves faster doesn't necessarily mean they're more advanced. And I also think that that might be part of what Alpha was kind of indicating here is, what if whatever this is, let's talk about the Left Behinds, the Book of Enoch, the Watchers, whatever it is, this group that maybe has influenced mankind for a very, very long time on this planet, that is inherently, or appears to be inherently evil, that controls bloodlines. They don't have the sheer numbers, but what is stopping them from going out there and utilizing all of their power and resources to accumulate to enslave mankind? Well, maybe it's the fact that they're not all powerful. They're not more technologically advanced than us, that they are maybe just like us and very vulnerable in what they are. And so they have to be very careful, and self-preservation then exceeds all other options at that level, to where acquiescing is probably their best option right about now when they're getting their asses kicked.
This is wild, and I'm not saying I entertain this, but I also didn't know how to respond to it. A couple of days ago, one of my buddies says, because he's kind of like me, he's fairly new to this too. He goes, what if all the viruses and bacteria that we think that they're using to kill us with what if that's a defense mechanism? Because yeah, it's probably going to kill, humans, but what if that poses a more lethal threat to aliens and it prevents them from coming to our planet?
That was one of the theories about the COVID vaccine.
And I was kind of like, hold on, bro. Like, I'll get back to you on that one, man.
It's the thesis of War of the Worlds. You know that. Well, it was in the film and it was in the original. Yeah, where they said the aliens came, they're turning the Earth into a big like meat soup, and then over time, a very short period of time goes by, and they start dying. They just start dying off, all these creatures. And they found out that it was because like Morgan Freeman's voice coming in saying, man had earned his right on this planet from all the years of being exposed to the microbial life and the bacteria and everything, whereas these invaders had not had exposure to that. So it was almost like interesting. And I like how both of you are talking this in a much more real world way, because I mean, this is kind of how I think about it. More advanced technologically, spiritually, I'll bet you those beings exist, but that's probably not as prevalent as people think. And maybe there's more civilizations that are just a little bit ahead of where we are, or maybe even imagine even 500 years from where we are in terms of development, right? Barring the fact that some people would say we got developed technologically as fast as we did because we had help. But aside from that, you have all these different grades of civilization. Now, when everybody starts giving me all this aliens or demons stuff, I could go, well, why don't you just keep demons as demons and aliens as aliens? You don't have to get rid of it. Doesn't have to be a 2D problem where it's one or the other. I have my own thoughts about demons, but we could still have both. But like, imagine this. Imagine we didn't know China existed. Okay. Imagine we didn't have the technology to know. We were still in the exploration phase. We didn't know China existed. And we're here, European, Western people.
They're over the ice wall.
What's that?
They're over the ice wall.
Yeah, they're over the ice wall. We don't know who they are. We didn't even know they existed. And then they developed technology maybe 20 years ahead of us. Okay, so they got ahead of us by like 20 years of technological development, but we still didn't know they existed. And then we start getting little hints that there's these weird like craft flying in and these weird looking people that don't look like us coming over. Like, I'm just saying from that perspective. And then, there's a bit of a pause. We don't really get to reach out to them. People start creating folklore around this mysterious experiences that they're having with what we now know are just people from a different civilization, but to people that would be experiencing that, they would start to mythologize it and deify it and make it something. This is just what we've seen throughout history. Like, you got these tribes in Papua New Guinea that started like airplane cults and worshiping airplanes that were flying over because they didn't understand where human civilization was at. They're a very localized tribe and living like it's the Stone Age, and they're seeing the airplanes come, and they start a whole cult where basically they worship the airplanes like gods because they bring supplies, and it's just the UN planes or whatever coming in. And so I'm just bringing this up because when we are looking at something we don't understand, we desperately try to understand it, which is that's a virtue. But with that impulse comes a lot of baggage because it's so traumatic for us to realize that there's something different than us and there's a different reality happening, and something might even be more advanced, or maybe like Josh was saying, only more advanced in certain ways and maybe very primitive in other ways. Maybe they didn't develop the level of empathy and whatever it is that humans have. They didn't develop the same things that we did, and so they're just completely alien to us. They don't think the way we think, so that is threatening. And I think also there's got to be some kind of part of us that just would hate to admit that we aren't the apex here. Like, we would hate to admit that, and nobody would want to admit it. And all the defensive reactions come up when you bring this up. But like, what if that's true? Like, would a cow hate to admit that humans exist and farm them and create entire, like, they make jackets out of them and like eat their kids, like with veal cutlets and shit? Like,
God, it sounds bad when you say it that way.
It does, doesn't it? It does. And I mean, I'm just saying, it's all about perspective, isn't it? Like, what we do to cattle, would appear to them like a great evil if they had the cognitive ability to understand it, right? And especially the industrialized farming and how brutal it can get, right? Um, and then you think, well, what if there's another level above us that sort of sees us the same way? So what they do to us appears to us as being very evil. I believe it is, but I'm just saying sometimes you look at it from a perspective of like when my cat brings home a rabbit and like fillets it and lays out, does what it does as a natural thing. He's not sitting there having a moral quandary. That's an instinctive thing that it does. That's the prey animal in the food chain. That is my food source. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not doing anything immoral here, right? That's how we look at it. So when humans are taking human morality that is relative to humans, human perspective relative to humans, human science that we have figured out in our time here relative to us, and then applies that logic to something not us, I just think that's a big mistake. And I think I now can understand why that's the jump to conclusions, Matt, everybody gets on whenever you bring up this subject.
Yep.
Deep.
As horrible as that sounds, but like that's kind of what Charles Fort was talking about. I keep bringing him up, but he's a big part of my series, as you're going to find out, Alpha. This Charles Fort character, who was an American author and researcher into the paranormal. And he wrote some profound things. Like sometimes when people just say it like that, it just triggers a level of thinking in you that either it resonates or it doesn't. Either you get it or you don't get it. But something about what that man said about describing what he determined after his lifetime of researching paranormal phenomena of all kinds at an academic level was that he basically described the human farming. Like that's what he described, that he's like, we're property. Something owns us. Something traded for us. They traded for us. They won us. They won our planet. And now everything's warned off.
Jupiter ascending.
Yep. And it's Jupiter ascending. It's all the movies rolled into one, really.
See, that's the part that, when I look at the numbers and stats of stuff, this is the stuff I've never been able to remedy outside of there's something that we're still not being told. When we look at the amount of kids that go missing every single year, right? And you look at
8.2 million globally.
And you look at the market for pedophilia or even organ harvesting, the numbers don't add up for just rituals or even organ harvesting. That you would have to say that there's like literally that's how many millions and millions of people that would have to have medical issues every single year to have that kind of demand. So when I've tried to make this make sense, I'm like, well, maybe they store it, but it's like, no, organs can only be stored so long. And I hate to I'm not trying to minimize it and just, remove emotions and just look at this logically.
Yeah.
So then I've always come to the conclusion. So who is the customer for this number?
Well, I mean, that's where you go. We've got to put all the puzzle pieces on the table at the same time. It's easy. Like when I started this, you start looking at these subjects in isolation, and the one subject starts to open up more questions. And so you go, oh, now I'm onto this question. And now I'm into another subject that I have to reference to answer this. And you just keep going. And you become like that guy with the strings, and it gets a little crazy. And some people go crazy, but some people don't. Some people are able to keep going. And you start to get to this point where you just, the easiest thing I do from my own thinking on this is, because I don't know, I don't have access to the classified table. I don't interact with the Pleiadian Council or whatever, the Galactic Federation or whatever. I don't have any contacts. So I just have to go with just logic. And I go, all right, it's very simple. Observe the human condition. Observe yourself as a living, breathing, conscious being that has a body, that has something animating this body. And when that body shuts down and dies, that thing that animated that body is gone. And that's all we know. Like when you just observe, and then you start digging in and you go, wait, I'm going to start looking into that more. Well, what if there's other versions of me out there, other versions of life out there? Well, let's look around our own planet. Is there other versions of life on our own planet? Oh, wait, there's like gazillions of different life on the planet, in microbial life, bacterial life, insects, through all the food chain of nature. There's so much life. And then you start getting into the life of suns and galaxies and what light is and photons and magnetism and everything else. And you go, wow, everything is kind of alive and eating itself and then rebirthing all at the same time. There's this huge thing going on, and we're all a part of it. And so if I'm experiencing my life here and thinking, is there others out there also experiencing that? Or is there other levels above my level of existence? Just like my cat, he probably doesn't speculate on it, but who knows if there's other levels above him, or the turtle or the ants. Like, what if it just keeps going? And if we accept that and we have observable evidence of our own situation living here, and then we start observing what humans do to other life forms on the planet. I was bringing this up recently. I'm like, look at the shit going on with DARPA, all this experimentation of mixing amphibian DNA with reptilian DNA and mammalian DNA and creating all these and trying to find super soldier serums and all this shit. And then you see what even just the makeup and the beauty industry does to animals. You want to talk about the Epstein client list for every form of life in existence? Look no further than the beauty industry and some of the pharmaceutical industry. Look at the monkeys that they put in these cages and all the tests that they do on them. They must feel like they're being abducted by aliens and being experimented on. And then you turn, like, look at the shark fin industry. Look what humans do to sharks. The creature that has been left over since the dinosaurs is still with us. It's one of the most magnificent creatures. And we just grab it out of the ocean, cut off the fin, throw the body, and then sell that fin for all kinds of stuff. And then you start going, okay, so look what we're doing to all the life forms on the planet. We are cloning animals. We are eating everything. We are skinning everything and milking it for every last drop of its resource to use at our disposal. And we do so justifying because it's part of the food chain and we need it for survival. There's a lot that's waste, which is really sad too. And you go, all right, so look what we're doing just phenomenologically. What are we doing? Where are we? What's your life? What's your existence? Measure that against something that's just one step above, that looks at you as the food source, that looks at you as the lab animal, that looks at you as the lab rat in the maze that needs to be trained, that needs MK Ultra programs to keep it in line, that needs all kinds of little electric mazes set up everywhere. Don't go there. Oh, put a sign there to tell those silly humans what to do and what not to do. And you just go, there's a management system. There's a human resources management system on this planet. And we all thought this entire time, it's just run by us. And you could go there. You could, yeah, it's run by us. But so many things start to come in that make you go, man, so much of what's going on is so anti-human. There's really only a few logical explanations for that. There's only so much psychology you can bring into it. You eventually got to get to a point of saying, there's something not us doing to us what we do to the creatures on the planet that are not us, that we look down upon as lower life forms. Right? It's just pretty logical.
Can I give an example of this?
Yeah.
Right here on our own planet, there is estimated to be 20 quadrillion ants on the earth, in and on the earth. The majority, 20 quadrillion ants. The majority of those ants will never even come to the surface. So according to ants, they rule and run the world. They outnumber everybody within their whole domain and environment. But 0.0001% of ants will run into a human being in their lifetime. Get picked up, looked at, drop back down, brushed off. Maybe they're in a house and they go back and they go, oh my God, there's these things out there. They're monsters. They're giants. They picked me up. They took me out of my world and put me back in. Oh, you're crazy, Steve. Go back to bed, you lunatic. Humans are a myth in ant populations.
Wow.
If people can extrapolate that, now you understand.
Josh, they're going to be like, where's your peer-reviewed studies on this? I need to see the data. I need to see bodies. Like, where's the alien bodies? I'm like, there's just sometimes, I mean, when you're dealing with a mystery within a mystery within a mystery, we have like 0.5% of the light spectrum that we see. We have shitty night vision. We have many limitations physically. So, it stands to reason that this might be out of the domain of our vision, but yet we run into these types of things and have run into these types of paranormal to us, right? paranormal. I love saying that to people, like, oh, it's a paranormal thing. It's weird. It's freaky. It's fringe. I'm like, yeah, to us, right? Like you're saying to the ants, like to them, it's all relative to your perspective and your experience. So to me, it's not outside of the box to think that maybe, and I said this in a video, I put it up and it got around a little bit. I was happy people resonated. I just said, well, we're talking about this. Our cabinets have been penetrated, like Klaus Schwab said. Our governments have been infiltrated, like Yuri Bezmenov predicted. What if our planet was captured? What if the human species cabinets was penetrated? Like, what if we were like, I start thinking sometimes, because I remember that haunting statement from Jordan Maxwell when I asked him about this subject. He said, everybody gets it backwards. They keep thinking that maybe these aliens look like us, or have the ability to do like Mission Impossible masks and look like us, and they can make they look like us. Like that's how, because that's from our perspective, right? That's how it would be. But he said, no. What if it's that we look like them? Now what? Because we look different than everything else on the planet. Like there's similarities, but there's differences. So that was the question. And I went, wow, what a question. So when people go, where's your smoking gun evidence for your theory? I don't have smoking gun evidence. I have the evidence that many researchers have collected on elements of this. Like we could get into all the UFO sightings and the radars and the UAPs we could get into that. We could get into all the stuff you brought up, Josh. But when I think about what I can logically say about why I entertain this theory, it just comes back to what I broke down. Just simple logic, simple reflection, observation of nature, understanding there's a hierarchy in nature, and just choosing to have the humility to speculate on the possibility that we aren't at the top of the food chain the way we thought we were. And that's not necessarily just a bad thing. That just sounds scary on the surface. There's definitely some negative implications for that, but that also maybe means there's some room for growth in this, whatever this reality is. Maybe we move our way up the totem pole or something. I don't know. But I just feel like logically, if we're doing this shit to animals that we look at as lower life forms, and then we're all like, oh no, nothing could ever be doing that to us. I just feel like
It's arrogant,
whether it's happening or not, it's an important speculation at the very least.
Let me well, let's I got to get ready to go, gentlemen.
As do I.
Yeah. It's 1
a.m. Josh, I don't know if you want to grab a last ad. Looks like Rumble loaded some new ones in there, so you might find some good ones. So we can get a last ad out. We'll go through the Rumble rants. We got some Rumble rants that came in. But I want to present you guys with this quick little question, just for the audience, to kind of, dwell on it as well. If you stand in front of a mirror, restroom mirror, bedroom mirror, is there always a reflection in front of you, or do your eyes have to be open for there to be a reflection?
Well, if you and I are standing beside each other, looking at the mirror, my eyes are open and yours are closed. I'm going to see both of us in the mirror. You're going to see neither of us. So we could say there's an agreed upon objective reality that there's a mirror and we're both looking in it. But we could say that we're both having a totally different experience. One of us experiences no mirror and one of us experiences seeing both of us in the mirror.
That was the point he was trying to make. Well,
and now look at David. You're
good. So I passed the test.
Now look at the world that we live in. Look
And
at the world we live in, because
now
that's exactly the analogy.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And that's why maybe our job is to help them open up their eyes. Is that?
Yeah.
To see the mirror. Like, look in the mirror. Think mirror.
Can't see your reflection till you open your eyes.
Unless you're a vampire, then we got to get into that. Do they have a reflection?
A whole lot of that. You ready for your? You got an ad up, Josh? So you can walk?
I'm gonna go ahead and just do the Rumble wallet. We'll go ahead and get this out of there. for everybody out there. They can freeze your account, shut off your cards, lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether, you can own Tether Gold, real gold on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verified by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, and gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, and move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer, and outside the banking system. No permissions, no middlemen, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. And if you guys go on Alpha's and mine's respective channels, you will see those tip icons there if you guys are interested in downloading the Rumble Wallet.
Absolutely. And I will give Emerald Med some love. And here we go. I want to tell you about something that is not well known, but it's incredibly powerful. It's called Ace Man. And it's a compound from aloe vera that massively supports your body's stem cell production, plus your cell health, immune system function. That matters because your body replaces about 1% of its cells every day. And as we age or have health issues, we produce cells less efficiently. The thing is, almost no aloe products have Ace Man and because it breaks down after harvest, and you can't even get enough from eating raw aloe because aloe's laxative compound. However, Emerald Med created a stabilized Ace Man and supplement with the laxative compound removed. It's called Aloe RX. They made it for pharmacies and now it's available for the public. I want to explain the value of Aloe RX. Stem cell injections can have amazing results, but cost $10,000 to $40,000 a treatment. LRX isn't the same thing as stem cell injections, but it massively supports your body's stem cell production for less than $100. You can literally give your body this for 16 years for the same price as one stem cell treatment. For people who don't need something extreme like stem cell injection, but want to help their body significantly, this is arguably the best value on the market. The longer you take it, the more compounding support you have. If you want to support a company that supports our channel, free speech with ads, check out Emerald Mex Aloe RX. Click the link below to learn more and get 30% off Aloe RX today. That link will be down in the description. It's in the live chat right now. And again, by you guys supporting these people, you help the creator programs to keep this content free. Do you got your Rumble rants ready, Josh? If not, I can fire mine off real quick.
I got a few of mine. I have a few came in. Let me go ahead and just read these off. I'll read these off. Andy Pearson, a $20 Rumble rant, one of your best podcasts. Appreciate that, Andy. You'll have to listen again. Didn't even notice how late it was. The doze off. $1 from Donna Mariab 333. What's your take on the DoD CBP drone incident tonight? I guess the Department of Defense shot down a DHS drone with their new laser accidentally, but people are saying something's up with this. They don't believe that it was actually a drone that was shot down, potentially something else. So I haven't really looked into it too much, but I'll have hopefully an opinion tomorrow. $5 from Funky Joe Medina. Bless you, David, for telling the story of the trafficked victim, Jane. Appreciate that, Funky Joe. $100 RPG 3573. Great guest. Thanks, Josh. Thank you so much, RPG. And William B447, $50 Rumble rant. Three of my favorite researchers. I appreciate all the work you guys do, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Appreciate you there, William. And then Funky Joe Medina, again, $5 Rumble rant. Just joined the channel for an annual subscription. You two are my new favorites of all time. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for all those Rumble rants. And to all the guys that did the subscriptions when they were coming in, I think I saw about 8 or 9 subscriptions came in, but it was all 5 subscriptions. So it was like 50 subscriptions. So that was awesome. You guys appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much on that.
Right on. Over here, we have $50 coming in from the Boom Diggity. So glad y'all have David on. I found David's research in 2021. Cult of the Medics is a much-watched series. It is the best research and high-level production. Thank you, David, for all the amazing work you do. I agree completely with that, Boom Diggity. Welcome, Shannon CLC, new monthly supporter. Thank you for that. $10 coming in from V. Ruman. Excellent discussion, enlightening. Thanks for your hard work. Very much appreciated. $5 coming in from S. Hole. This is deep. Feeling like a rubber chicken. LOL. $17 coming in from Raven. Fascinating conversation and guest tonight. Thanks, guys. And last one, $5 from Smay 60s. Heavy stuff. Haven't sat around and talked deep stuff in a long time. Usually just turns into arguments these days. Far out. Ha 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 ha. Thank you guys again. Just, like Josh said, for all the support that you guys do. It really does mean a lot to us. I did tell you guys I had some unfortunate news, and I hate to be the one to bear it. And I didn't want to do it right away because I wanted to confirm it, because it is such terrible news. For those of you that are on Twitter, X, you guys know that there's a Marine known by the name of Sergeant Petrie. Brandon is his real name, and he was murdered yesterday. And all I know is by gunshot.
Jeez.
And yeah, and he was really pushing hard for Doc Pete Chambers. He's really trying to do a lot into the movement. The part that sucks is me and him have been we're at odds, the last couple months. And, it sucks that something like this happens and we didn't get to remedy that before it happened, and that really sucks, because what I do remember of him before we're kind of at odds is he was just very thirsty to be involved. He just wanted to matter in the fight. And, like I said, I don't know the specific surrounding the circumstances of this. But losing Sergeant Petrie, regardless of the fact that we were fighting when this went down, it sucks because he was a Marine, and it sucks because, just the situation itself. So you guys, as you guys venture back into social media, you're probably going to see information about that. Keep him in your prayers. Keep his family in your prayers.
Ouch, man. Sorry to hear that, Alpha.
Yeah,
Prayers to his friends and family. Man, David, where can we find you?
Well, first of all, guys, what an awesome chat. I really enjoyed it. Alpha, great to meet you. Truly, I'd love to talk to you more. You're a wealth of information. I don't think you're new to this at all. I think you've got all the right instincts. You got the training. I learned a lot from you tonight. So thank you, Josh. Always good to hang out, and the people in the chat, always lovely. You guys have the best followers. So thanks for that. If you want to get into what I'm doing, I'm on X. I'm at Truth Warrior Dad. I do stuff on there. I do have a Rumble channel. You can catch me on Rumble. I should get on there a little bit more. I'm on Twitch. If you just look up Truth Warrior, DW Truth Warrior, that's where you'll find me. And then I'm doing a lot on Substack. I do lots of free stuff over there. I've got paid content over there. I do research into lots of stuff, including what we talk about here. And I'm, like I said, writing this article series, really focusing in on the background of all this, the psychology of all this. So if you're into that stuff, go check it out on Substack. Again, just go there and look up Truth Warrior. You'll find me. And I'm also doing the Unslaved podcast. We've been doing this, myself and Michael Tessarian, since 2016. It is one of the most information jammed podcasts you'll ever come across. It's high academic level as well. And we do lots of these types of subjects. We're doing a whole rebuild of our website right now. So we're just upgrading, but yeah, unslaved.com is the place to get the extra downloads with like really detailed research. And yeah, that's about it. I'm here. That's where you can find me.
Awesome, brother.
There you go, folks. We did have a super chat that came in. I don't know if it was yours or mine, Josh, but it's from Peter Frederick, 7145, $10. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. I don't know if you got a song on the way out, Josh, but if you do, fire it up.
I don't have a song.
All right.
But
well, I will play our show song as the way out. So with that, you guys do us a solid, smash the thumb, leave the heart, and definitely leave a comment. That definitely helps get these shows, into the algorithm so they can get on the leaderboard. I enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait till the next one, fellas.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
When the lies go global, legends go live. There's a war in a signal, a ghost in the feed. They rewrite what you saw, then they tell you believe. They sell you a savior, they stage you a fight, keep you divided while they move at night. But you remember the screen like glass in the storm, saw the core behind the chaos, saw the shape of the swarm. When the deep turns darker and the truth feels gone, they don't run from the fire, they drag it into dawn. You can't fake this kind of vision, you can't pretend this kind of hate, for the cage is built in silence, for the life they love to take. So let it rise, let it roll, let the whole damn system shake. Overwatch, the guardian, say it loud, let the whole world hear. Digital soldiers, last protector from the coward's heart. They appear the storm, the truth, they hit like thunder, never disappear. Some call them watchers, some call them heroes, but the world gon' know their name right here. Overwatch, navy sharp, mind like a blade, intel unmatched. She's a trap in the shade, buys a player, pulls the whole web down. Turns whispers into blues, turns panic in the ground. The guardian, Marie Forge, you got 4 hands. Tactical operator and the hardest backblade from rifles to microphone, same old, same fight. Now the mission's on the air and the target's in sight. Let them copy your words, let them cosplay your pain. We'll pretend to watch the title, but they can't stand in rain. Cause legends don't burn, legends don't break. They turn pleasure into flame. Overwatch, the guardian, say loud, let the whole world hear. Digital soldiers, last protectors where the cowards hide. They appear the storm, the truth, they hit like thunder, never disappear. Some call them watchers, some call them heroes, but the world gon' know their name right here. Overwatch and the Guardian. They're on the TV screens, your phone screens, and in the shadows where the real war breathe. They don't chase clout, but chase the network. They don't play nice, they break the script. Star from the flag, glory in the fight, stripes in the blood, humble in the price. Matrix shattered, veil torn through when the watchers move. The darkness moves.